You're listening to Bring Me the Axe. I'm Brian White, I'm one half of this morbid equation, and I'm joined by my co-host and actual brother, Dave. How you doing, Dave?
Thank you for asking. There's like a handful of days into October, and I am exhausted.
That's not good.
Well, trying to keep up with the political situation.
Oh, that's no good. That's
your
first mistake.
Yeah, it's a real tough game to try to remain hopeful while the U.S. devolves into Woodstock 99. And at the same time, I have a immune disorder that is not cooperating these days.
Oh, so that's heartbreaking.
Yeah. So, all in all, pretty fucking tired. But, it is Halloween time. It is fall. It is October. That's good. That's a good thing. Yeah. I like that. But,
I got my monster teeth fitted today.
Now, when you say fitted, do you mean like by like the same person who would like fit a dress or a suit?
No. It sounds more exciing than it is. It does not involve a secondary.
I'm not gonna lie, doesn't sound that exciting.
It's very exciting for me because they're really sweet teeth. It's like fitting a mouth guard for like boxing or something like that. You just, you heat it up, you put it in your mouth, you kind of fit it around your teeth, and you make a little seal, and then you let it sit for a little while. And then you kind of try to talk around it, and you sound real funny. But they look awesome.
Now, will people be getting close enough to you?
Oh, yes. That is a very vital part of this. I've been taught how to do it. I have not executed it yet, this being my first year. But you kind of like get all up in their shit and then back off because you don't want to get punched or nothing.
No, I made a blanket statement last time that we all need to keep our hands to ourselves, everybody.
Yeah. So, yeah. But my costume is complete. Tomorrow I'm going to put the whole thing on with makeup and see if it looks lame.
Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I chose this tiny glass because I thought maybe I'll drink this beverage slower if I have a tiny glass. But right now I just feel a little foolish.
It's a cartoonishly small glass.
Yeah. It is a 4-ounce glass. So that
so
was the wrong choice.
Really draw it out.
Yep. I too enjoy a snifter of port at Christmas. That's one.
So we practically grew up in neighborhood video stores, and the steady diet of utter garbage that those shops provided us with continues unabated to this day. There's no one else I enjoy chopping it up with more about trashy movies than Dave. Just before we get into it, here's a little housekeeping. If you want to keep up with us between episodes, you can also find us on Instagram at Bring Me the Axe Pod. And Dave's over there at That Queer Wolf. Mm-hmm. You should give us a follow because right now we're doing a whole 31 days of Halloween thing. Where every day we're going to give you something that we give you a recommendation of a movie that you can watch that's very much in keeping with the spirit of the season.
Now let me tell you, I have seen a couple people on ye olde Instagram that are just like, I guess got to do the obligatory thing, the recommendations for Halloween. And I'm like, listen, you fucking horror people, there is nothing that people like more than recommending movies. Don't act like this is like putting you out because you got to do it. All of a sudden it's obligatory. You fucking people do this every goddamn day. Telling me to watch Scream 4 like it's the best fucking movie ever made. And now all of a sudden it's just such a hassle. I embrace this. I love telling people what they should watch. Now, are they going to watch it? Probably not.
Probably not. But you know what? We put it out there, and sometimes they do, and it's nice to hear that they do.
That's true.
Some of these outfits, like fucking some certain podcasts that are much larger than us, have just been like, here's 31 movies you can watch. Boom, done.
Yeah.
I'm like, guys, draw it out. Fucking savor it.
Hey, man, I created assets for every single one of these goddamn days. Now they're very simple. But I still created them.
But they're fun. And there's a little music that goes with it.
I think that's the hardest part.
That really was kind of...
I mean, how many fucking times can you use the Misfits and the Cramps? Now, if it were me, I would be the whole thing, but...
Yep. I'm also on TikTok, if you do that sort of thing.
It's doing the funky chicken, I believe the mashed potato. I'm just digging deep here.
Doing the Freddy.
The bag is empty at this point.
I know. God. Yeah. Look us up by name over there if you want to follow. You can also contact us directly at bringmetheaxepod@gmail.com with any questions, comments, or suggestions. Do let us know if there's a movie that you love and like to hear us give it the business.
Yeah, because already I am loading up next year with all my dumb bullshit.
Ooh, we've got a great fucking list. Like a list that already needs to be sort of pared down. So if you got recommendations, man, get them in.
Yeah, am I going to make everybody listen to me talk about made-for-TV horror movies? Yup.
Mm-hmm. Bronx, what is it, Escape from the Bronx we're doing?
Whichever one we didn't do.
Well, that was Bronx Warriors. But
okay, then yeah.
So more tight pants than Mark Gregory.
Mm-hmm. Oh, God.
Yeah.
The best.
Lastly, if you like what you hear, you can subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube now. Search us by name and subscribe if you prefer to consume your podcast that way. And you'll be doing us a favor by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So, you know, do it. I don't know what you're waiting for.
I personally really appreciate it when people do it, and
I do too. It helps a lot.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
It costs you nothing. It's still like a simple way to just kind of support us, you know.
Yeah, and also we love you very much.
And we do. And I say as much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I probably don't, but I'm not a very demonstrative person.
Yep. I come to you with open heart. And if you listen on YouTube, do us a favor. Give the episode a like and leave a comment. We love hearing from you guys. I just want to get that all out of the way right at the top of the show because motherfucker, is this an awesome trailer that I'm about to run for you.
Yep.
Yeah, here's a taste.
What happened was true. The most bizarre and brutal series of crimes in America.
Stop! Stop!
This is the movie that is just as real, just as close,
Crazy! You gotta make us stop!
just as terrifying as being there. Even if one of them survives, what will be left? The Texas Chain Saw Massacre. After you stop screaming, you'll start talking about it.
Ooh, my goodness.
My God, that is an overwhelming, extremely aggressive trailer. That is the original theatrical trailer for this movie. And even though it's a trailer that basically shows you everything, still, whoo.
I think it accurately reflects the entire film, which is pretty rare that a movie really is just like, this is exactly what this movie is. It's just loud sounds and people screaming.
Yeah. Let's see. So yeah, this is, for me, I have a really kind of sort of unusual, like memory and like history with this movie. Cause this was one of the ones, like when we first got the VCR in like 1983, and we got the little membership at Video Paradise. Mm-hmm. Of course, I was immediately like taken by the horror movie section, and like a lot of those movies got like real salacious covers and really draw you in. This one in particular was something special because it was a Wizard Video release. It was like the only version of this movie that was out, so it was the extra large box, and it's the kind of Wizard Video presentation, which just kind of strips it of all color, and it's just like red, white, and black. And there's a woman hanging from a meat hook on some
the one sheet for this is rough.
It's like nasty ass scaffolding, and fucking like Leatherface is like turned toward you. It's like, what is this? And I remember pulling it off the shelf and looking at it, and Mom being like, "You don't need to be looking at that. That movie is all just blood and guts, and you don't want to know nothing about that.
Now, quite famously, it is actually not blood and guts. It is, however, I would venture, too aggressive for a child.
Yeah. So that's the thing. And so in my head, and it wasn't just her, like this is a movie that like after it started to hit the video stores, because it was really niche, even though it was a very, very successful movie. It was still like a very niche thing. So when it dropped onto video stores and everybody everybody with a video store membership was seeing it, they just sort of assumed that it's like, here's this nasty dude. It's called the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. It's going to be like the biggest gauntlet of blood and guts. And so it had this like reputation that was
Still
completely
does. It still has that reputation.
some completely unearned in the minds of most Americans. And so every time it would come up, people would be like, "Oh, that movie is so gory and so bloody." And so like by the time that I finally caught up with it and I saw it, I was extremely disappointed by this movie.
I too, I think, bought into the hype and the mythology around it, and I don't remember when I first saw it. I imagine it was quite a long time ago. This has been on everything forever. It was only recently, I want to say the last maybe 4 or 5 years, that I watched it, and I was like, I think I like this movie.
Yeah. It was probably about 5 years ago that I was like, fuck it. I'm watching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And then when I'm watching it, I'm like, this movie is fucking amazing. What the hell was I thinking? I've actually mentioned it. I think on our first Friday the 13th episode, I mentioned that like that night that I put in a tape on like Cinemax and just let it run with like Friday the 13th, and then part 2 ran. And then after that, Chainsaw came on. And so I was like, oh shit, let's watch this. And then I watched it and I was like, this is fucking bullshit, man. This is not what everybody had described to me after all these years. I had no idea what the hype was.
I mean, it is a very aggressive movie. It is loud. It is upsetting. It is confrontational.
Yes.
And I think in that way, it does make it scary. Now, I don't find films scary, but I can understand why people would be upset by this movie, because there is a lot of implied brutality and a lot of implied violence, and a lot of it's sort of tongue in cheek. I think Tobe Hooper over the years has made maybe more than is due of the humor in this movie, because there's not a lot of humor.
Oh
in
yeah,
this movie.
I keep hearing, oh, it's a black comedy.
No, it's not.
Cut it out. It's got some parts that I do find legitimately very fucking funny.
Yeah, there's like an absurdity to it.
Yeah. But yeah, so like this movie is one of, I would say, like, this is one of the big four. So from the 1970s, there's all of a sudden, we talk about this in our Halloween episode, there is a sudden shift in the way that horror movies are produced. Like, Wes Craven drops Last House on the Left, which I think this movie kind of owes a little bit to.
Yeah, a lot. I would say more than a little.
Aesthetically, they're very similar. Mm-hmm. And then Tobe Hooper drops this one, and then we get Dawn of the Dead, and we get Halloween. Yep. And the entire landscape of horror movies changes like fucking dramatically.
And they're all coming from the same kind of cultural position.
Yeah. They're all independent movies. They're all made with very, very small budgets, and they have this like really sort of outsized impact. Now, of those four that I named, obviously, I think Halloween is the one that I think is really the most sophisticated of them.
Oh, yeah.
This is a very close second for me.
I wouldn't put it that close for me. I think Tobe Hooper is a talented director. Was a talented director. I don't think it's as impressive, and I don't even think it's even like remotely as impressive as Halloween in terms of storytelling or visually. I do think that he does a lot of really interesting things, and he makes use of his resources very, very well.
Yeah. It is the aggression of this movie is the thing that, like, what you had mentioned, like, horror movies don't scare you. They don't fucking scare me either. But there are certain movies that are so confrontational, so in your face, that I feel like I am on the back foot the whole time, and I'm a little wound up watching them. This is definitely one of them.
And I think it's speaks to his creativity that he is using a lot of technique to keep you there. Like, you're not just there. Like, this is a sonically overwhelming movie. It is just very, like, the sound design is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah, the last third of this movie is roaring engines and screaming.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not just that. There's, he is doing things. He's doing things in editing. He's doing things in how the shots are framed and everything. It's all very intentional, and it feels like it's not. And I think because of that, it does sometimes feel a little sloppy. And also, I think sometimes it just is a little sloppy. He's not as tight.
I disagree. I feel like first of all, I know that he storyboarded this movie very very thoroughly, so that when he went in, simply because he knew he just didn't have much money, and so he had to know what he was doing on top. He didn't have time to sit around and fuck with like lighting setups and and camera setups, and so like everything he does is very deliberate. There's a few parts that are very experimental. I don't think it's a very sloppy movie. I think that there are parts of it that, just because of the way that it looks and the fact that it is a little cheap.
Oh yeah.
It can come off a little slapdash, but I feel like I've watched this a few times just this year, and I swear to God, like, I think that this is the one movie that has probably the most sort of directorial technique in it. There's a bunch of shots that are very, very interesting and just like,
and
cool
some of them
look
aren't
at.
even his. Some of them belong to what's his face there.
Right, his cinematographer.
Daniel
I can't
Pearl.
remember his name.
Daniel Pearl is his name.
Yeah, Daniel Pearl.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fucking Jesus Christ. What a movie. Shall we do the facts?
Yeah, you gotta.
We gotta. The year was 1974. Year of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Yes.
So here are some other movies that were released in 1974. Black Christmas came
Ah.
out in 1974.
Hot damn it, that's my favorite movie.
I had to mention it. Yep. And go if you want to hear us just make sweet love to a movie. Listen to our Black Christmas episode.
Now that is a sophisticated movie.
Good. Goddamn, what a movie that is. Yeah. The Cars That Ate Paris came out in 1974.
I'm going to make you talk about it next year because that is a fascinating film.
Yeah. It's not what you expect it is.
Nope.
Also, and I just mentioned this because Vinegar Syndrome just put it out and I loved it. The Devil Times 5 came out in 1974.
That is a
Deeply troubling
movie that upsets me for non-horror reasons.
Leif Garrett, you fucking weirdo.
Oh, man.
Also in 1974, Abby came out.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Black Exorcist.
Black Exorcist. And rounding out 1974, from Brazil, The Bloody Exorcism of Coffin Joe.
Is that the third one? Second one?
Yes. It's either that or it's the fourth one. I can't remember when the Strange World of Coffin Joe come out.
That is just a weird series across the board.
Yeah, I love it. We're going to have to do those ones at some point as well, because those are very interesting movies. As we mentioned, cast and crew, our director is Tobe Hooper, one of the big four American indie guys from the 1970s. Along with Romero, Craven, and Carpenter, he laid the foundation for horror in the coming decades, and went on to catch Steven Spielberg's eye and direct one of the biggest horror movies of the 80s with Poltergeist. Of the big four, Hooper gets my vote for the weirdest. He was never one to shy away from risks and unusual projects, and apart from Texas Chainsaw, Salem's Lot, and Poltergeist, we also get highly weird shit like Eaten Alive and Life Force.
Both very strange films.
Yeah,
For different reasons.
And I love them. I love them both. I love them both to fucking death. And
Eaten Alive, I'm not as big into.
I only recently came around to Eaten Alive, and I'm so glad that I was like, Yeah, that's a very fucking strange movie. Our cast includes Marilyn Burns, who spends the entire final third of this movie screaming.
And the first 2/3 barely saying anything.
Right. It's not really clear why, but not long after Texas Chainsaw, the acting roles dry up, and the 2000s until the 2000s nostalgia circuit fires up. She plays Sally Hardesty again in Chainsaw 3D. She's in something I'd never heard of up till now called Kiss Daddy Goodbye, about two young children who avenge their father's death at the hands of bikers using their psychic powers.
That sounds awesome.
I know. My God, I want to watch it.
She's in Helter Skelter.
Yeah, she plays Linda Kasabian, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. The one with Steve Railsback.
Yep. Steve.
We've also got Gunnar Hansen, who's a really interesting guy. Mm-hmm. He took the job on when finishing graduate school in Austin and got the part mostly based on his size. Big guys make great bad guys. Mm-hmm. When the shoot was over, he packed up his shit and headed home to Maine and was surprised to find out after the years went on that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a hit with horror fans. When not acting, he was writing poetry, and he wrote for magazines. I don't know which magazines, but
I would imagine poetry journals.
Yeah, I would love to read some Gunnar Hansen poetry.
He's in Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers.
That's right, he is. Yeah, he returns to screen in the 80s, in the late 80s, mostly into the 90s on a lot of really cheap direct-to-video horror, acting right up until his death in 2015.
Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers is not a good movie.
Nope.
Good soundtrack though.
It's got a really, really great title. That's about all you need to really know about it. And rounding out the cast, we've got Edwin Neal, a Bronze Star Vietnam vet who claimed that shooting Texas Chainsaw was an even more grueling affair than jungle warfare.
Yeah, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the production of this film, I think.
Ooh. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of notes about the production of it. There's definitely some shit to talk about. It's mostly just the scene towards the end, which is the one that everybody likes to talk about because it's disgusting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. After struggling to land roles, Edwin turns to voice acting for video games and anime, and he finds a real home there. You can hear him in games like Deus Ex, Metroid Prime, and as the hitchhiker in the recent Texas Chainsaw hide-and-seek video game.
Wait, who is he in Deus Ex?
I don't know. I saw his name, but I don't remember the character. It's also been a million years since I played Deus Ex.
The voice acting in that is hammy as hell.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Speaking of the Texas Chainsaw video game, it's all right.
I haven't played it.
Did you ever play like Dead by Daylight or Friday?
No, I don't like the those like horde games. It's just not my thing.
I really enjoyed playing the game itself, but there's no, it's a fucking online game, so you have to play with other people.
Hate those.
And I hate that. I hate that because like my experience, I played it for a couple of weeks before I just hung it up. My experience with it was always invariably, I mean, every single session, there was somebody who just left their headset next to a speaker that was playing really loud music. And so it was just like this distorted bass. Or
it's probably invariably Rob Zombie.
No, it was usually rap.
Oy.
And then, or the other option was there would be somebody talking on their phone and then coughing on bong hits. And so like, I was just like, this is fucking maddening. I don't know how anybody does this. So fuck this shit. And I canceled my PlayStation Plus account.
Yeah, I can't do. I tried when was it Grand Theft Auto 5 came out?
Oh yeah, the GTA Online thing.
And I thought I liked that game a lot. And then so I was like, all right, they're never going to put out another one of these for 100 more years. So I tried that one and I was like, I'm going to say I played it for like 2 days and I was like, fuck this. People are garbage.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. The gameplay itself was fine. Like I had a couple of real like memorable moments playing as like the Sawyer family. But yeah, well, it just wasn't enough to balance the experience.
You believe you also watched recently the remake of this or the latest reboot?
Yeah. So when I put this on sort of for my initial run through, I also put on, cause there's the original movie, there's Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which is a movie that I think is really great. It stands on its own. It's a very different kind of movie. Mm-hmm. There's also Leatherface, Chainsaw 3, which I think is just okay. There's Texas Chainsaw: The Next Generation, which is the one that famously has
Renee Zellweger
and what's his face?
Well, a very strange movie.
Yeah, very, very weird movie. I've only watched it once. I never went back to it. And then we've got the remake, Texas Chainsaw 3D. There's another one that I'm kind of forgetting the title of. And then there's the one from 2022, which I was like, let's compare and contrast. And so like I finished watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then I put on I think it's just called Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, same thing.
The Netflix one.
Yeah.
From a couple of years ago. And I fucking hated every second of it.
That is how I felt the first time I watched
I
it.
loathed it. I fucking hated every second of it. I thought it was the stupidest shit I've ever seen. It's like, it doesn't even really make sense in the context of the sort of broader movies, you know? But also, Leatherface does not really work as a franchise killer in the same way that like Jason and Freddy do. Like, he really kind of has to have the family. So these ones where he's on his own don't really work for me.
No. I watched it a second time because everyone was like, oh, it's so great. And I was like, did I miss something? Because I did not think that movie was great. I thought it was obnoxious. And it has that problem of all new horror movies where half of the movie is shot in complete darkness.
Yeah, it was that thing that I really took away from, and I don't want to make this episode about that movie, but the thing that kept coming to mind as I was watching it is I was like, this is so modern. It has the same sort of like real cynical, nihilistic kind of reactionary vibe that the Saw movies do, right down to the fact that the colors yellow and green should have their own screen credits in it.
Ugh.
But it's also really, really mean in ways that I found unpleasant.
I thought there were some moments that I tried to embrace the more campier aspects of it. And when I did that, I was like, all right, it's not that bad.
What campier elements?
I mean, when he chainsaws through the entire busload of people.
Okay. So yeah, because there's that moment where he gets on the bus and they all whip out their phones because of course they fucking do.
Yeah, the whole thing's got its head up its ass the whole movie.
And the guy goes, like, one wrong move and you're canceled, bro. And I was like, Leatherface, just murder everybody here.
And he does.
Please. And then he does. So yeah. But yeah, there's, God, the sequels don't really hold up. I think that part two is the dark comedy that I think he always like sort of intended this one to be, because it's very silly and it works by that way. And also Bill Moseley's in it and he's hilarious. And Dennis Hopper is insane in it. But yeah, after that, like, I don't really care about them. I kind of wish there was just this one movie.
Yeah, it doesn't work as a franchise. But you know what? Honestly, most of these don't. I mean, they crank out these fucking franchises. I think the only one that really works is Friday the 13th, because they realized what they were doing by the third one. And Nightmare on Elm Street to a certain point. But that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, because also Child's Play does the same thing where, like, when they realize that they can't just keep making another like doll slasher movie, so they lean into the really the most ridiculous shit.
Yeah, but they cross a line where it's like, all right, you can't force camp everybody. It's not how it works. And they really try to. It's like when you're throwing John Waters in there to be really kooky, it's like, all right, you kind of overplayed your hand.
Right, it's like when Jay and Silent Bob show up in Scream.
Yeah, I guess just stop it, everybody. Make new movies.
Yeah, hey, cut it out. Just cut it out. Cool it.
There's got to be countless people out there who have great horror scripts. Make those.
Me. Hey, Hollywood, call me. I've got so many fucking ideas. So yeah, here's a tag. It's really one tagline, and this one is a banger. Who will survive, and what will be left of them?
That's it.
That's
all you need.
Fuck yeah, man.
It's a good one.
That's a really good one, because it sells it. Who will survive? Well, Sally survives. What's left of her? Not much.
Yep, and also probably in real life. I mean, definitely in real life now, but
yeah. So the original shooting script title was Leatherface. Yep. And then, what is it? I think it's Bryanston, the distributor, came along and we're like, no, we need something that really makes their mouth water. And they called it something else. And so his alternative title that Hooper suggested was Head Cheese, which is like so gross.
I spent a good amount of my time this evening watching interviews with Tobe Hooper, and man, I'm a little down on Tobe Hooper right now. So I might be kind of a bummer.
There is so much doing the research on this one, because honestly, there of the sort of like crucial, like original sort of 70s horror movies, this is the one maybe apart from like The Exorcist, few other horror movies are as mythologized and sort of canonized as this one. All of the research I did was like really dubious facts.
Yeah.
That I swear to God, people came up with many, many years later.
Oh yeah, I think this happens a lot. I think George Romero tended to do this as well, where he would hear something years later, or he would come up with an idea years later and be like, yeah, of course that's what I meant. And it's like, come on, no, you didn't. What you actually meant was still pretty cool. So just stick with the one fucking story, all right?
You're right, because there's this one thing, like there was an interview that I read with Hooper where he something that you had mentioned earlier in an earlier episode about it, and I had also kind of come to this conclusion as we were watching it, that in a lot of ways this is a home invasion movie.
Mm-hmm.
And like Hooper says that, like, oh yeah, like, I mean, that's the thing, is like Leatherface is just home by himself doing Leatherface stuff, and these people just keep breaking into his house and scaring him, so he kills them out of like self-preservation. And I'm like, I think maybe you heard somebody else say that along the lines and thought you just kind of co-opted it. That's cool. That's fine. Whatever.
There is something about, because I watched a interview. It was William Friedkin interviewing Tobe Hooper, and it was like an hour-long thing, and I got about 40 minutes into it and had to turn it off because it's like, no, you're a genius. No, you're a genius. No, that thing you made is really good. No, your thing is really good. I'm like, boys, you're both geniuses. Now shut the fuck up and talk about the movie. And it's like, I know I come across, one might say as a contrarian from time to time, but I have a real aversion to this sort of like straight white guy director of the 70s. Because I think, and I said this to you earlier today, it's a little bit like Stephen King too. I think because when people have been around so long and they become sort of a household name, and we don't know much about them, because prior to the internet, we didn't know much about any of these people. Like, you knew what you read, and that was it. And people didn't focus on directors that much, unless you were like Steven Spielberg. But even then, like, your private life and your political beliefs or whatever, like, that didn't really come out too often. And I mean, unless you were like Jane Fonda. And they get dragged out.
Hey-o.
And now it's like you start to learn about these people, and I think we had for so long projected onto them like, oh, they're just like us, like they have the same political beliefs as we do, and the same ideals that we do, and like you just assume that, and often with zero evidence, and I think it's just because like horror is sort of a fringy thing. It's really embraced by kind of at a certain point, not really so much anymore, but there was a time when it was sort of a fringe genre. It was embraced by kind of outsider people and misfits and shit like that. Had a real heavy metal following. And you assume that those people are sort of just like you, and they've sort of suffered the same hardships or whatever. And then you learn that they're not. And that is real disillusioning, because it's like, oh, you're some shitty white director. Like, you say bad things about women, you abuse your actors, like and I hate to learn that shit, because it's like, oh man.
Oh, I know.
You're not a good person.
This is like very treacherous business, what we're doing, because like we do learn a lot about the people, and so many times we've done the research and we're like, you suck, dude.
Yeah, and I have a lot, like, I don't care, if people are politically different, whatever the fuck they are, it doesn't fucking matter to me. It's once I start to learn that it's not just that you're not like me or you hold different beliefs than I do, but that you're actually a bad person or were a bad person. That's when I really struggle. And we're going to get into that a little bit later, because that really colored my viewing and how I read this this time around. And it kind of changes things. It would be like learning. I mean, this happened to me when we did, I think it was Black Christmas, where it's like, oh, Bob Clark was kind of a douchebag. Right.
Like when we did Night of the Creeps.
Oh yeah, that was.
And we got into Fred Decker, and we were like, god damn it, dude.
And it's like, it's like this like nerdy kind of like men's rights whiny bullshit, where it's like, shut the fuck up, dude. Like, you are a famous director. I don't know why you're complaining about stupid shit on the internet now. Like, it just, I don't care, and it makes me think so much less of you. And I know that there is a debate about separating art from the people who make it, but you really can't. So
I have a much greater tolerance for that. I mean, there is a threshold, obviously. Nothing hurts worse than finding out that James Woods was he's a real real like S tier piece of garbage.
Yeah.
After like, being Videodrome being one of my favorite fucking movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, but a lot of the times I can get around that,
Well, that's what I mean. Like, so John Carpenter is sort of an insufferable grump a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I can just sort of be like, okay, whatever, man. Like, just shut up. Because he's not out there like saying misogynistic or racist bullshit.
No.
And not that Tobe Hooper has. That's not what I mean to imply, but like there is going to be some unsavory things about him that kind of come out after this movie, about this movie, that I think really affect its legacy in a very bad way. And I don't like the idea that in horror fandom, we're willing to overlook some things because it's a classic. Like lots of things are classics, but.
Oh, sure. Yeah. That is to say, like, nothing is unassailable. Right?
Yeah, this idea that like certain things are unimpeachable because, it was made in 1973. Like, I don't give a fuck about that, And that's the trap we're walking into here.
Yeah. In yet another example of how much horror fans owe to both pornography and the mafia.
Yeah.
The film's distributor, who also funded the production, was a laundering front for mobster Louis Pereno, who secretly produced Deep Throat. He also distributed Flesh for Frankenstein, The Devil's Reign, and Dark Star, among several other titles.
Those movies are all bad.
But their undoing came when he signed a shady deal with production manager Ron Bozeman and the Texas Film Commissioner. And after the dust settled and the money was handed over to Bozeman, there was a total of $8,000 to distribute among the cast and crew, well short of what they were owed. It went to court, which then revealed Pereno's involvement in Deep Throat, which led to a broader federal obscenity investigation to which, fuck that, it's just porn. But it still went to court in 1976, and Pereno ended up with a little jail time and a fine. But,
jail time. Huh?
Yeah, but Texas Chain Saw Massacre basically ended this. Well, it didn't end. It ended this period of this mobster's criminal empire.
Yeah. Thank God for the mob.
I know, man. They've
I should not romanticize the mob. They are terrible people.
No, they've made so many fucking movies, though.
Yeah.
To the mafia.
Huzzah!
I toast you. Yeah.
Excelsior.
Yeah. So that chainsaw in this movie that is famous for its chainsaw, real chainsaw.
Okay.
The chain is on the bar.
Yep. That is it's gonna be problem number one.
Yep. Obviously there's a couple of moments that I'm sure we're gonna point out and talk about a little bit. Also related to saws, the family is known as the Sawyer family. A Sawyer is someone who operates a saw.
Oh.
Right.
Okay. I like that.
Yep. Okay. Also, I kept seeing this everywhere. It's not fucking true. The rumor that Hooper intended for this movie to be rated PG, just a fucking rumor.
Yeah, not true at all. There's no possible way this would ever have gotten anything less than
fucking
an R.
way. There's a little tiny bit of blood in this movie, but it does not matter. It is brutal. It is a fucking gruesome movie, even without it. No, this movie was like, they very famously awarded an X rating, and Hooper worked with the MPAA in order to sort of like bring that down and get an R rating.
Yeah.
So all this shit that you keep seeing, like, oh, he was trying to make a PG rated movie, nonsense. Absolute fucking nonsense. Mm-hmm. Gunnar Hansen developed the Leatherface character independently of Tobe Hooper.
And I think Gunnar Hansen gives a very impressive performance.
It's a very, very interesting performance.
It's remarkably nuanced for a character that has 0 lines.
Yeah. So the fact that there's 3 masks is sort of like part of his creation. And like just the way that he sort of like expresses himself, entirely him. I think at one point he tried to actually like say a word.
He almost had a line and they were like, nope, out.
Yeah. So yeah. The entire house that this movie takes place in was eventually put on a truck and moved. I did not know this. It is now part of the Antlers Hotel complex in Kingsland, Texas. It is a restaurant called Hooper's.
It's a nice house.
It is a nice house. I would love to go there and eat food at Hooper's.
Where is it now?
It's in Texas. In
Kingsland, that's
Texas.
Why I can't. I'm not.
Yeah, I don't want to go to Texas.
But. No offense if anyone listening is in Texas. It's not for me. The South is not for me.
So yeah, this was one of the most. This was up to at this point. This was the most successful indie film at the time until Halloween came out a few years later.
Yeah.
Yep. It's produced on a budget somewhere around $100,000. It ultimately pulled down $30 million by the end of its theatrical run.
Very impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. This was one of the video nasties in the UK, meaning that it wasn't subject to prosecution, but it was the subject to confiscation if it was found on the shelves at the video store or in your possession.
Yeah, they only prosecuted you if you were selling gay magazines.
There actually was a prosecutable list, and like everything in that whole video nasties legacy, they're all like arbitrary weird titles.
I think Driller Killer is one of them.
I think it is, yeah. Yep. And in a weird bit of side biz, the Texas Chain Saw Massacre also represents one of Charles Band's earliest successes.
Really?
Along with Halloween and I Spit on Your Grave, Band licensed the Texas Chain Saw Massacre for his Wizard video label, and its release in 1982 on VHS coincided with the sudden proliferation of video stores across the country.
Man, he was just right there. Right there.
The dude was on top of it. Yeah, and he kind of talks about this in his autobiography. Like, him and Anthony Perkins used to, they would go out and they would sort of like rent these reels from theatrical movies, and then they would, because I think Band had a piece of equipment that he could actually transfer the movies to videotape, and so he was just like pirating movies left and right with Anthony Perkins. And then eventually he was like, hey, these video stores are kind of a thing. I should make a couple of labels, and he made like Wizard Video and Media. And,
now that makes sense because in Tab Hunter's biography, he talks about how they had a huge film collection, actual, real, film reels. They had a huge collection. So that would make sense that Anthony Perkins, who he was in a relationship with for like 30 fucking years, was like, would go out and buy these movies.
Yeah. Yeah. And then he and Charles Band would run them off to video.
Charles Band. And then he bought a castle.
And then he bought a castle, yeah. From Dino De Laurentiis.
Mm-hmm.
Lastly, right before we jump into this.
Well, there's a lot more to talk about, I think.
Oh, right. Because also you've got like reviews and shit.
Well, I do have reviews, but before we get to reviews, well, what do you want to do first? You want to hear the reviews?
Let's hear reviews, and then after that, I'm going to sort of make a case because I teased this in our last episode that I kind of feel like it's a little bit moot for us to sort of talk about this movie because there's not much that we can really bring to it that's new. But I feel like I've got a point of view on this that is new. So,
well, I'm going to hit you with the reviews because people did not like this movie. Well, critics
really, because I thought that this was critically well received.
Some people liked it.
Okay.
A lot of people did not. Well, I mean, let me tell you what they are, and then I'll give you a broader consensus. So, the Austin American Statesman. So it was tough to find like contemporary, like real contemporary reviews because originally it was sort of like dumped into drive-ins and nobody reviews drive-in movies at the time. Mm-hmm. So I grabbed a bunch of shit from Texas. This is Austin American Statesman. Well, not nearly as elegant as The Exorcist, nor nihilistic as the classic Night of the Living Dead. Weird to call Night of the Living Dead a classic 5 years later.
I know, right?
Tobe Hooper's Texas-made movie is a powerhouse of sustained terror. The Austin American Statesman is being a little bit generous. They don't really like it, but they're like, it's shocking. Now, Linda Gross, LA Times. The Texas Chain Saw Massacre is a despicable film about 5 young people traveling through the desolate flatlands of Texas who seek refuge in a mansion are subsequently tortured by the family which lives there. I don't like the use of which in that sentence. Also, kind of a long sentence, Linda. Anyway, torture and gruesome death through a filtered lens are still ugly and obscene. Craziness, handled without sensitivity, is degrading, senseless misuse of film and time. Now, the pearl clutching here I find a little absurd because...
Unbelievable. You would think Gene Siskel wrote that review.
Yeah, this is 1974, and you want to talk about how insensitive they are about mental illness? Good God.
Like a Tumblr user.
Yeah, even the most progressive of people were still calling gay people by the F word.
Yeah.
Let's see. Victoria Advocate, this is another Texas one. Billed as the first horror movie ever filmed in Austin, this sophomoric exercise in Halloween pranks may only horrify Texans because anything so ludicrous could have been produced here. It's a very clumsy sentence that doesn't make a lot of sense. What he's saying is the only thing that's funny or shocking about this is that it was really made in Texas. Because nothing ridiculous could ever come out of Texas, Ted Cruz. Now the last one, I saved this one for last, and I'm not going to tell you who it is.
Oh, good.
Which means you know who it is.
Yeah.
Horror and exploitation films almost always turn a profit if they're brought in at the right price. So they provide a good starting place for ambitious would-be filmmakers who can't get more conventional projects off the ground. True. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre belongs in select company with Night of the Living Dead and Last House on the Left of films that are really a lot better than the genre requires. Not, however, that you'd necessarily enjoy seeing it. Roger Ebert, Chicago Sun-Times.
It's a remarkably even review.
He actually doesn't hate it. He thinks that it's shocking and gross, but he thinks the acting is pretty good, which I agree. I think the acting in this movie is actually pretty good. And he thinks the directing is quite good. So I think he's looking at it technically, and because he doesn't find anything sort of like patently offensive, that he's not outraged by it, which is strange because this is a man who loved being outraged.
This is true. Only outdone by his fucking partner.
So it gets picked up, like the more positive outlooks on it come a little bit later. Once it starts to reach, it sort of gets out of grindhouse territory and gets into actual theaters.
Right, because a thing that does need to be sort of like, you kind of got to bear in mind is back then, it was the kind of cinema experience was a little different. Like nowadays, a first run picture comes out, it's in theaters long enough, for a couple of weeks, few weeks, maybe a month, and then they shuffle it off to video as quickly as possible or just streaming. But like, you Texas Chainsaw Massacre drops in 1974. You could go to the movies in like 1979 and still see this, because some theater picked it up. They weren't in quite as much of a hurry because there wasn't like a secondary market for it. There were like drive-ins and there was television.
And they packaged them together. They put these movies with something else a lot of times too, just to get as much, like wring out as much money as you could. They'd sort of stick this with like a movie like Deranged.
Yeah.
I actually think this did play on a double bill with Deranged, which is kind of interesting because they are, essentially the same story.
Yeah.
So yeah, once it gets out of there, it goes to Cannes, it gets a little bit of attention. And then it starts to get like maybe a little bit more positive press. I think quite famously Rex Reed gave it kind of a good review. They got some fucking mileage out of that one. And then over time, this movie has been analyzed to death.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that, which kind of brings me to my thesis for this episode. Cause what I want to do is I am going to, cause I'll like early last year, I wrote an article about this, like 3,000 words about how this movie is a fairy tale. And very much in keeping with the sort of tradition of European fairy tales. And I'll as we go through this, like we'll point out some of the production stuff. We'll talk about all like the trivia and like story beats and stuff like that. But I'm also going to sort of make a case that this is very much like Little Red Riding Hood and Hansel and Gretel and Jack and the Beanstalk. So like I don't think anybody, like I've never seen this approach really taken before. So I hope that this is at least interesting.
I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I don't think you're that far off, but I do think it's worth talking about the origins of the story itself. Mm-hmm. Because there's where this comes from is, I think Hooper had made one other movie, right? I can't remember what it's called, but
I don't know, but like this is his first like feature property.
Okay. So, he sort of was working with, he really minimizes Kim Henkel a lot, which Kim Henkel didn't end up being anything more than just this movie, But I didn't like the fact that he was just sort of like, oh yeah, he was a friend of mine. I kind of threw him a bone. It's like, all right, buddy, come on. You gotta be a dick about everything, do you? There's a lot going on at the time. This is what I really found interesting about it this time around is kind of putting it in its cultural context, because this is yet another kind of reaction to the Vietnam War a lot, and just a larger cultural change. And I think that is very obviously reflected in the story itself. But I think it often gets situated alongside other movies that are kind of counterculture movies that are a reaction to, shifting social norms and all that. So this is sort of like Easy Rider, Five Easy Pieces. These are stories that are about a very like a culture that is changing to reveal itself to be quite a bit more brutal than it really is, or that people ever believed it was.
This is a movie that could not have happened without Vietnam.
No. And everything else. Like, I mean, this comes out, when the Watergate scandal has just broken. I mean,
yep.
the worst aspects.
We're on the other side of the Manson murders.
Yeah.
Things start to really kind of unravel for the United States in the 70s.
And so that's what this movie really is. This is a reaction to all of that, to people sort of starting to realize that their government has lied to them about a lot of things. And that more broadly, that just people are not what they thought they were. That this idea that people are fundamentally good. Well, it's starting to not look that way in 1973, 74. You're seeing all this awful news coming out about the atrocities that were happening in Vietnam, but just like the way that cities are starting to sort of decay around the country and are being ignored. Minorities are speaking out much more broadly and sort of loudly. And it's starting to tear things apart a little bit. It's very much like now. And the reason he made this movie, the kind of what he got in his head was that they've become so accustomed to seeing violence on TV, their casual consumption of violence, whether it's in the news or it's, late night movies or even television, I think, was starting to change quite a bit. And primetime shows were getting a little more dramatic and serious. And so the idea that, he took everything to an extreme to sort of be like, you consume violence all the time, and yet now you're shocked by this story, because it is, in fact, so he uses the whole based on a true story trope.
Kind of. The opening narration
that's a joke.
Implies it very heavily.
So they really leaned into the idea that this was based on a true story, true events. And it's a joke, and it's part of the whole kind of trick that he's pulling, is that, everyone had just learned that you can't trust people anymore, that everybody lies. And so he kind of leans in with this idea that's like, this one's a true story, wink, wink. Like, even the fact that chainsaw is spelled incorrectly as two words rather than one, it's all sort of this nod to be like, we're fucking with you because the whole world is fucking with you. It is a little nihilistic, but I don't think it's as nihilistic as other shit at the time. And you get also I think it's weird that there's not really a protagonist in this movie. You have antagonists who are sometimes sympathetic, but you don't really have protagonists because the main characters aren't ever really built out. They're not particularly likable.
No, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought of that because I'd always sort of thought as Sally in a kind of final girl role, but she really isn't.
Oh, no, she's not at all. But there is a weird, when I was watching that Friedkin thing, he does say something, Tobe Hooper says something really weird. I wrote it down because I thought it was really strange. You can give me a second here while So this is a 2014 interview. And he says, this movie about how damn strong women are. I mean, women kick ass in this movie. And I was like, the fuck are you talking about?
I know.
You literally abused this poor woman for a month.
I was going to say, she is brutalized in this movie
And she does
just
not
kinda
fight back.
screams and screams, and she doesn't really, she doesn't lash out. She doesn't fight back.
No.
She just runs.
So if by strong he means able to withstand brutality, I guess maybe that's a really shitty message, though. And that, I think, kind of speaks to where I landed with this, which we'll get to much later. But so he's looking at all this stuff that's kind of the way the world is changing, and there's a lot of parallels to now, because the Sawyer family really represents this kind of white rural fear that the world is leaving them behind, doesn't have a place for them anymore.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
because I was about to pipe up with something about that, because also this is there, like right now the conservative fear has always been about the city. The city is like fucking Babylon.
Well, the whole thing is rooted.
Sodom.
It's all
It's
rooted in it's in loss, in things that are gone, because it's a lamentation of what could have been.
Right.
That's the whole ideology is based in that, and that's
Right,
sort of
but-
what you see here too.
Yeah, but this movie, because also at this point in the country, the middle of the country is starting to crumble as well. Mm-hmm. You know, lots and lots and lots of men are coming back from this war horribly fucking broken, and they're just not really kind of able to kind of hold the middle in the way that they used to. Like rural America is being bought up. It's being consumed by like factory farms and shit like that. So like a lot of that kind of American heartland is starting to go away. And the Sawyers kind of are representative of that, because like there is this kind of idea that kind of gets glossed over a little too quickly, but that the slaughterhouse no longer needs them because
Right.
like technology is kind of outmoded them. And so
Right.
like this is what they are left to in order to survive.
And there is a violent resistance to change. Like, it's not just outspoken. It's a refusal to seek out the actual explanation for what's happening. Instead, they just sort of blame outsiders. And I think the outsider, that's another part that they don't really pay much attention to. But when they pull up to the gas station and he realizes that their family is from there, he sort of tries to steer them away. And it's only after they refuse to leave that then he's on board with killing them.
Yeah.
And so it's like when you are either part of the in-group or associated with the in-group, then it's fine. Otherwise, you are subject to this, like, your progress is the enemy, and you are therefore associated with progress, thus you are the enemy.
Right.
So that's kind of where all this is coming from. And then you tie in the actual crimes that this is sort of inspired by. And one of them is obviously Ed Gein, who I'm sure everybody knows who Ed Gein is at this point. But in case you don't, he, in the 1950s, was a Wisconsin recluse, farmer, babysitter extraordinaire. My favorite fact about him. Who was kind of a bit of a necrophile. Yeah, he was a Renaissance man, really. He was
He wore many hats.
Yeah, he was a body snatcher, necrophile, occasional killer, not too often. He experimented with the parts of ladies, unfortunately, and he was not really a cannibal. He was just, it's a fucking disgusting story. But
he's a ghoul. Is what he is.
He really is. But he is also kind of a sympathetic character, which is very, very hard to do with someone who did really heinous shit.
Yeah. It's the fact is that like he was just so fucking crazy and just adrift in his madness that like this is really the only fucking outcome that was possible for him.
Yeah, like this is a dude who by the end barely knew where he was, let alone what he had done. So he is kind of a very tragic person. But again, he did really horrible things. So that's that. The more important one, and the one that I think is super interesting. So Kim Henkel said the bigger influence was Elmer Wayne Henley. Do you know who that is?
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. That is, for my money, the most horrifying serial killer story of all time.
I also find that story very, very disturbing.
Yeah.
I can't remember the actual killer's name.
He was the henchman of Dean Corll.
Yes, Dean Corll,
the candy man.
And he's much less sympathetic. He didn't really kill. I don't think he killed anybody. Well, actually, no, he didn't.
No, he found the victims for him.
Yeah, it's really fucking gross and terrifying. But why Henkel was so inspired by him was that Dean, when he gets arrested, I don't remember why, but there was a reporter there. And so there's actually a recording of him being arrested and calling his mother. And
I've heard it.
You can look it up.
It's heartbreaking.
Mama, I shot Dean. Because he did. He killed Dean Coral. Because I guess at a certain point he went too far. I don't know where the line was, but...
I know.
And so he thought the fact that Henley was willing to just be like, nope, I did all these bad things, and then I killed Dean Coral, and I have to go to jail now, because that is what you do. That's what happens when you do these things. And he thought, how strange it is that this boy, because he was like 16.
Yeah, he was a teenager.
But like how weird it was that he was willing to do all this really awful shit and like lure these boys away to be murdered and to help in disposing of the bodies, like all this really terrible shit. But he had a morality to him, like a very sort of strange killer morality. Mm-hmm. And he was like, what if there was a family that was like that? Like, what if this story, essentially, like, they have a way of justifying this.
There is a moment when the old man is like, I just don't take much pleasure in killing.
Yep. And I think that is a really, really fascinating thing to be like, well, because they are a sympathetic group, at certain points. Not so much towards the end, but like where they are positioned in all of this is like, that everything modernized and pushed us out of the way, and we're just trying to survive down here. Now that's not really true, and it's no less true today than it was in this fucking movie. Everybody's got an option. Like, you can't be like, well, my family's always been coal miners. Well, that may have been true, but we try not to do that anymore. So maybe learn a new fucking trade.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like people change jobs all the fucking time. So yeah. On its face, it's understandable. And I do have sympathy for that, even though it sounds like I just didn't, but, and I just think it's really interesting to be like, well, yeah, they're cannibals who are chopping up hippies, but hey, come on, things are rough sometimes. They're just trying to get by like everybody else.
Meat's meat, and a man's got to eat.
Exactly. So I thought that was really, really interesting to just sort of be, to kind of put all these pieces together. Like, the world is a fucking horrible, hard place, and so are all of us. And I think that is true. That is why I think it is kind of interesting. But, that's also why they went so far as to like kind of put their killer in a mask. It's this idea that like all these evil people are sort of around us all the time, and we don't realize it because everyone's just sort of got this mask on. And that by now that's a bit of a kind of a cliche, but I think at the time it really wasn't, because it's maybe really hard to conceive of this today, but like in the 50s and 60s, people really they were very naive. Like the shit that people didn't believe was possible, that they, like when they would read about certain killers or something, they'd be like, well, no, that couldn't have been possible. Even like as into the 50s, when people would be like, well, women can't murder. It's just not in their nature.
Right.
And of course, yes, they can. They do it all the fucking time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing is you hear, like, going back into some of these true crime stories, particularly when we hear about serial killers, they got away with it back then, specifically for as long as they did, specifically because nobody believed that somebody could just do that. Right. Or even in the case of like mass murderers, like a guy like Howard Unruh, who just went up his neighborhood, like shooting people
randomly.
Like, it was really, really hard for people to kind of get their head around it, because he had no motive except that he just broke one day.
Yeah. And I mean, if they were willing to dig a little deeper, you would have found the motive. There was always a motive. Like, why people did all this
always
shit.
A motive. I mean, it just took them fucking decades to figure out like what motivates a serial killer.
And the weird thing is that it's actually not that hard to figure this shit out. The thing was, it was impolite to talk about things like this. It was impolite to talk about sex crimes. No one would talk about that. And so if you're not willing to talk, it's the same fucking story over and over again. And if you're not willing to talk about it, it's so easy to just be like, gasp, what do you mean he killed a woman to have sex with her dead body? That's not possible. And it's like, it was. And if you didn't have your fucking head in the sand, maybe you could have done something about it.
Yeah.
And so that's really where this is coming from. And once I got into that, and I apologize, that was a very long diversion, but like, I really was like, what an interesting place to make a movie from, because it's cynical in a lot of ways, but it's also sympathetic.
Yeah.
In a strange way.
That's a tough balancing act to strike also, because like horror movies at their heart is a very cynical experience.
Yep. I think I'm drawn to it because that is my perspective on the world, essentially, is like, I think most people are fucking monsters. And they're capable of really terrible things. But also, my heart breaks for literally everybody. Like, I have sympathy to a fucking fault and empathy to a fault. And I spend every single day of my life writing about the worst things people have ever done to each other. That is my job.
Could your experience maybe be colored by this sort of like vicarious trauma?
No, I just think it gives me a lot more insight into how awful people can be. But also, like, how they get there is usually pretty fucking sad too. Now, I don't think it trumps what they end up doing, but I think I appreciate there's a certain honesty to coming at a movie like this that from that perspective, and I appreciate that. I don't really know if that's how he actually felt, or maybe I'm just projecting onto this a lot of things, but I think it's an interesting way to conceive of a film. Because it created something entirely new.
Yeah. Yeah, like what flowered from this is essentially an entirely new, completely unrecognizable genre of horror.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get into it.
Yes, let's.
All right. So we open on a narration that wants us to believe that the movie we're about to see is a true story. They don't really say it, but it's heavily implied.
And it's heavily implied by television's John Larroquette.
That's right, who was paid with weed to do this.
Yes, paid with one joint. Now, if you ask me, I'd say this is at least a two-jointer. I will say, John Larroquette's got a great voice for this.
He does. And that is the thing, is they asked him to do his best Orson Welles. And like, that's
I get it. I feel it.
I love it. But yeah, since then, again, apocryphal, dubious facts that have come by. There have been many attempts to claim that there was something like this that happened in Texas. It fucking did. There's nothing. This is created out of whole cloth and some real world horror.
Mm-hmm.
Then we cut to the sound of someone digging. Sudden flashes of corpses in advanced decomposition. And we cut to
I like this opening a lot because I think the camera flashing, the sort of jarring sounds, like it's all very unnerving. Mm-hmm. And it reinforces this belief of like, oh, maybe this is true. Like,
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. This is one of those movies that like people eventually started coming around. They started calling it documentary style filmmaking.
Yeah. It's just like how, when people refer to Cannibal Holocaust as the first found footage movie, that is not a found footage movie. It is very clearly a slickly produced film.
It is a movie that has some footage that is found.
Yes.
Yeah. Then there's a grim tableau of two corpses arranged on top of a grave marker and a radio report of that desecration. One of them appears to be eating the other one.
And so this is something this is very much the Ed Gein part of the story, is he would like do shit like this. Like he would, preserve a torso and then like paint it gold just to see what it would look like. Like he would just do weird shit.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He's a guy who just loved arts and crafts.
Yeah. It's outsider art. It's folk art. Okay. You wouldn't understand.
Yeah. The radio report implies that this is a widespread problem at several cemeteries.
But you can also hear in that, if you keep listening to that radio report, it's really setting up the kind of undercurrent of this whole movie. It's nothing but horrible news.
Oh yeah,
it's like the worst
bad
possible news you could come up with, and it's just a long stream of it. as we watch like the fucking heat haze rise off of the pavement, like in the worst way.
Oh yeah,
This makes
tight close up of like the sun.
Yeah.
The credits are all like sunburst activity and shit like that.
Yeah, again, Texas listeners, apologies, but this makes your state look not great.
Just hot and dusty and
Really,
dry.
yeah, really hostile and unwelcoming. And that's just the landscape.
So yeah, now we cut to the brutal sun beating down on Texas. A van pulls over, and a young man helps another young man in a wheelchair out of the van and down to the bank where he gets to work taking a piss.
Oh, and these are the most 70s looking teenagers I've ever seen. Just sideburns for days.
Yeah.
They're 80% sideburn.
Yep. A truck passes suddenly, throwing debris from the road and startling the man in the wheelchair, who rolls down the hill out of control.
This
Falls out of it.
is terrible. This scene is awful. This might be the most upsetting scene in the whole movie because he's peeing into a can and then the can falls. It's just the worst outcome.
It really is. Back in the claustrophobic van, everyone complains about the stifling heat, and man, you could feel it just watching this scene.
Mm-hmm.
Pam reads about the malefic influence of Saturn from a book about astrology. And
I like this is another part I really like, this idea, this inclusion of astrology. It's like that kind of hippie hangover bullshit. Like, you know, I don't know if it's intended to endear us to them or make us like them less.
I don't really know. All I know is, since I've sort of incorporated into my sort of grand theory about the fairy tales, it's taken on a character that's really appropriate to that. But in the context of the movie, I don't know. I think it was just shit that people were starting to kind of like talk about at the time.
Yeah, it's just a very hippie thing to do. And I think that's just another way to kind of reinforce this idea of like, these are standard hippies.
Right, because this is about the time when like what we come to recognize as like the new age movement started to kind of form and crystallize. Like this is when it was really like human potential movement.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. So now they stop at a crowded cemetery to check on the remains of Sally and Franklin's grandfather, who is interred at the cemetery.
Now the cemetery populated by local hires, one and all.
Presumably, it's one of the spots that was vandalized. A drunk guy rolls around on the ground next to the van, babbling wild. Mm-hmm. So this is the first part that I want to sort of point out as this sort of fairy tale thing. So in the world of fairy tales, there is often a clear boundary between the mortal realm and the wild, untamed space of fairies. It's commonly represented in these stories as a forest or some sort of wildland where anything can happen.
Now, I don't want to undo your theory. When you say fairy tales, which culture's fairy tales?
This is all very European.
Okay. So you mean Germany, essentially. What is now Germany?
Yeah. And the thing to kind of remind everybody is fairy tales very much used to be horror stories. Like the original translations of a lot of these stories, they've been cleansed and sort of made very family friendly by Disney, but
hey, even those are a little bit rapey.
Like in the original story of Rumpelstiltskin, like when she sort of gets the name and she figures him out, she gets his, undoes his trick. Rumpelstiltskin like stomps one foot into the ground and it like sinks up to his knee and then he tears himself in half. In the original Cinderella, the sisters try so hard to put their feet into the slipper that they like smash them up into like fucking pulp and shit. These stories are horrifying. So when I say fairy tale, like put that Walt Disney shit out of your mind.
So you mean like the Brothers Grimm shit?
Yeah. But also like European and Irish folk tales.
We can include them in Europe. Just
Germany,
most people
France, Italy, like a lot of that stuff too. Because there's more to it than just like the Brothers Grimm. Coincidentally, used to be the name of this podcast.
Well, that's right.
Long time ago. Yeah. So without the clear-cut predictability of the path, mere mortals are likely to vanish forever, lost to the wild entities that live in these uncharted spaces. There's a dreamy quality to these places in the stories. Liminal spaces occupied by things and people driven to the brink by the wild energy of Arcadia. And we get this here, represented by Sally's entry into the world of the dead. There's plenty of people walking around the cemetery, but the common thread among them all is that they don't seem to be from here.
Also, they have very big sideburns.
Yes. everybody's got a cowboy hat too.
Yep.
And then
Which implies that maybe they are from there.
the one local from this liminal space is a lone drunkard who's rolling around babbling about the things that he's seen there.
Well, he represents to that idea of being pushed out, because what he's babbling about is essentially how nobody takes him seriously. Mm-hmm. And because, he's sort of a representative of another time, an earlier time. And now
when you could just sit there in a spare tire at a cemetery and just drink yourself into a bowl.
Now look, you can still do that. This is what I'm telling you, Republicans. You can still do that. Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. Nobody's gonna judge you. I don't.
We just want
care.
if
go
you
get drunk in a spare tire.
If you get heat
cemetery.
stroke,
It's awesome.
I want you to go to a doctor and not have to pay $1 million. That's all I want.
So in a lot of ways, this is a reference to Little Red Riding Hood, with Sally going to check on the remains of her grandfather in place of going to check on her sick grandmother. So now satisfied, they get back on the road, passing near a slaughterhouse, cutting to scenes of the crowded slaughterhouse as Franklin explains how they have to hit the cows over the head with a hammer several times before they die, getting carried away describing the action of the captive bolt pistol that they use now instead of the hammer. The whole
He's really
in, and then it retracts, and it goes in, and it retracts, and all I can think of is that Family Guy bit. Pow! Right in the kisser. Pow! Right in the kisser.
Is that the fat guy strangler?
Yes. Pow! Right in the kisser.
He's really into the cow killing part of all of this.
He gets very excited,
and I find this part. This is, I think, maybe one of the first missteps for me. Is the inclusion of this weird slaughterhouse footage, because it's like, I know why you're doing it. Mm-hmm. I just don't think it's necessary. And I get that it's, he's making a sort of illusion here, and he's trying again. It's that off-putting. It's very assaultive visually and
right, because it's not just like cows. It's like shitloads and shitloads of cows on top of each other.
Yeah, and so I get it, but it's like you didn't need this. It's a little heavy-handed, I think. Okay. And maybe that's just by my 2024 standards. Maybe in 73 or 74, I would have been like, oh my God, that's the most wildest shit I've ever seen.
That is a thing to bear in mind. There were no movies that looked like this.
Yeah, I just kept thinking the only thing that existed like this at the time was I Drink Your Blood. Yeah. And that movie sucks.
And that's a very cheap movie.
But yeah, there are moments in this where I'm like, you took me out of it.
Okay. So they pick up a hitchhiker like people used to do in the 70s.
Ooh, always a bad idea.
And never a good idea.
Great way to get yourself murdered.
Yeah, he's a real weird dude, but explains that his brother and grandfather used to work at the slaughterhouse.
He said when he gets in, or I don't even know, I think he's before he gets in, one of them goes, oh, he's weird looking. My note says, yeah, he is. Because this dude is really, really strange looking.
Yeah.
And Franklin says, I think we just picked up Dracula. And then he says a whole family of Draculas, which is one of my favorite lines in this movie.
I love it when anybody uses Dracula as a plural noun.
I think after I watched this once, I made a beer a couple weeks after that, and I named it Sad Draculas.
So, the whole family is in meat, he explains. He produces a series of photos of slaughtered animals and then explains the process of making head cheese.
Well, so he says something interesting. It's a throwaway line, but he's explaining, because Franklin's very enthusiastic about this, asks him about the slaughtering, the process of it. And he says, no, you got to, the old, it was better the old way. They died better that way. And I found that line very upsetting. It's a really unnerving thing to hear.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. It's just a weird line.
How do you mean exactly? Because
and he doesn't say. He just, and I think because what he says next is that he kind of launches into this, it put everybody out of work. And it's okay, well, that has nothing to do with the cows dying better, though. That's a separate matter, sir.
Yeah. It's just his opinion as an unemployed slaughterhouse killer.
Yeah, I think what he's sort of getting at is it was better for everybody that way. But just the line, they died better that way. There's a line in Needful Things where, the devil character says something like he knew Jesus and he died badly. And I'm like, God damn, that is a hard line. And I feel like this is one of those where I'm like, ugh, I don't think I like that.
Yeah. So now the hitchhiker, he represents our first brush with the sort of fairy antagonist. In this case, he's the big bad wolf. This role will change as the movie goes on, but for right now, he's the first brush they're going to have with the sort of unknowable horrors of the fairy world.
You really thought this one out, didn't you?
Huh?
You really thought this through.
Oh, yes, I did. When I say 3,000 words, man, that's a dense 3,000 words.
Hey, look, I'm just here for the yucks, okay? My thought is Franklin's the kind of guy who talks to the cab driver.
He's me.
I was just going to say, and by that I mean my boyfriend. You're going to give the guy a ride.
You know what?
Give him a ride.
Like people, we're interested in other people's experiences, even if they're talking about head cheese and killing cows with hammers.
He's just there getting into it. And then he grabs the Franklin's knife.
Yeah.
And it cuts his hand. And this is the first time I noticed this weird editing technique that Tobe Hooper uses that I think is extremely clever. He clips the last frame of every scene right before the transition.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like it causes like a stutter step.
It's smash cut, really.
But it's not quite a smash cut because it's not so hard that you're in a new scene. It just cuts to a different person, but it cuts a little too soon, like just a millisecond too soon. So you're sort of like, I'm trucking along, watching this thing, and then, like it's like when you're walking up the stairs and you think there's one more step.
Holy shit, my knees are in my chest.
I was going to do this is the fourth stage of syphilis.
Yep.
And that's an old George Carlin joke, everybody.
Yep. So, he cuts his hand very badly to everybody's horror, and he just laughs and produces his own, a straight razor from his boot.
And look, when he hands the knife back to Franklin, the look on Franklin's face is so great.
Yeah. Then he takes a picture of Franklin with his old camera, tries to get him to pay for it, which he doesn't.
Now, look, everybody, if you're ever in this situation, just pay for the goddamn picture. Path of least resistance. This whole thing could have been avoided if they just gave him $2 for the fucking picture.
I know.
Hell, give him $5.
Nope. It's a slippery slope, man. You go to Times Square and, everybody's got their fucking hand out. So when he doesn't, he takes the picture back. He sprinkles some black powder on it and then sets it on fire. Then he pulls out the razor from his boot amid the chaos and he slashes Franklin's arm with it.
So this is why I think, partially why at least, your theory is maybe not so far off, because this whole picture burning, cutting, blood wiping is very ritualistic.
This is my next point. So he performs what could be described as like a magic ritual here, cuts himself, takes and he burns Franklin's picture, which is, a very common occult practice in certain currents. He cuts Franklin. There's the whole smearing of blood on the van as if to sort of mark them for death.
And what you actually don't see in the moment, you don't see it until much later, is that he makes an actual like symbol on the van. It's like a
sigil. Yeah.
Yeah. He's not just wiping his hand, because it looks like he's just sort of like smearing his hand all over it. But later on, when they look at it, it's an actual symbol.
Yeah, it looks like a magical sigil. Pam even remarks like it looks like he was trying to write something. So yeah, this is
what he was trying to write was, you should have just given me the $2 Whole thing could have been avoided. Yeah, you don't have a lot of room, but still.
Yeah. I mean, the symbol doesn't really serve any sort of occult purpose. It's not a recognizable occult symbol if you're into that sort of thing. It's just witchy.
Yeah, exactly. If you're thinking about when this is taking place, we are 4 years out from the Manson murders, in which symbols play a very big role. Now, they're nonsense symbols, just like the one on the van, but that's all it's trying to do, is to sort of call back to this brutal thing.
Yeah. And also it preoccupies Franklin for like the entire first half of the movie.
Well, I mean, Franklin is hysterical. Franklin is a terrible, terrible character. If someone was like, hey, we're all taking a road trip and my brother Franklin is going on, I'm like, well, then I'm out, because your brother Franklin is awful.
And the thing is, I'm going to point it out when we get to the scene. I think Franklin gets a bit of a bad rap. He's mostly just a downer.
Yeah.
But people act like he is like a fucking baby the entire movie.
He is a bit of a man-child for most of the movie. He's kind of insufferable. I mean, he has a kind of a reason to be, because they ignore him the whole fucking time. But like, he's kind of a bitch.
Yeah. So back to my fairy tale bullshit. The wolf represents a couple of things in fairy tales. He's the kind of perversion of the familiar, either an upright or anthropomorphic wolf man, or your average wolf on all fours, with the wit and intellect of a person.
Yeah, a bit of a standard wolf, a sassy standard wolf.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one I prefer more in this case. Do I like a wolf man or do I like a talking wolf?
I think I
like a talking wolf.
Yeah, because a wolf man, you're like, oh god, here we go again.
Yeah. He's temptation and danger. You can speak to him and he will endear himself to you, making you forget that he's also a wild animal.
Now, here's where your theory falls apart, though, because there is zero about this character that is endearing or charming or sexy.
Well, no.
Repugnant through and through.
Right now, he is the dangerous wild animal in the form of a human. So
he's
in a little
always
while,
the dangerous wild animal.
In the little while, the wolf is going to sort of shift into a slightly more charming, less overtly threatening version.
I mean, I would argue he's a little less psychotic, but he's not less threatening or any more charming.
Now they quickly pull over, kick him out of the van. As they drive away, Sally, Franklin's sister, cleans up the cut while Pam reads Franklin's horoscope, which sounds like it predicted what would happen that day.
That's what's really great. But what she's reading all these horoscopes, and they're all just like, "Hey, bad shit's coming."
But they're basically, maybe don't leave the house today because somebody's going to kill you. Mm-hmm. So they pull into a gas station to fill up, but find the place is out of gas
because gas crisis.
Yep. And so the old man who attends the place insists that they buy some barbecue and wait for the transport to show up with more gas, which should happen a little later on today
or tomorrow.
Yeah.
What I do like is that he's constantly pointing you back to all the bad things that are happening socially, like gas crisis, Manson murders, all this shit on the radio. Like, it's nonstop bad news, and they never really let you get away from it. Like, if you're trying to immerse yourself as a form of escapism, which is arguably not a good thing, you're not allowed to in this movie because you are constantly on your back foot. And you're constantly being reminded of how terrible the world is, even when it's like basic shit like this. Like, can't get gas today. You're stuck here in the middle of fucking nowhere with these psychopaths.
Yep. And Saturn's in retrograde.
And that is the worst part of all.
I know. Saturn's in Gatorade. The sign on the station says, "We slaughter barbecue."
It's true.
Yep. So the old man is the upright version of the wolf. He intends to be helpful, but he's also the corrupter. If you just hang out for a while, the gas truck will be along and you can fill up and go home. Also, what luck? He knows where Franklin and Sally's childhood home is located.
So
he's more than happy to help out and sell them barbecue made from human meat, presumably.
This is where I think it's kind of interesting that he's saying, like, oh, you're kind of locals. You're a sort of local here. I'm going to try and steer you away. Go elsewhere for gas. Or at the very least, just wait here.
Right, because he does tell them eventually, like, where there's another gas station.
Yeah, and he tries to get them to go there. But it's only after, I'm pretty sure it's only after he says, my father or grandfather, whatever.
It's their father's place?
Yeah, and I think that's when he's just sort of like, well, you shouldn't stay here. You gotta go. So he's a bit of a harbinger in that way, but I think it shows that kind of in-group, out-group thing where he's just like, oh, well, we can't kill these people. They're kind of from here. They're kind of us.
Yeah. Franklin asks for the location of an old house that belongs to his father, muses over the sort of person who would cut themselves like the hitchhiker did. Sally's boyfriend, Jerry, buys some barbecue, gets the location of another gas station, and off they go.
Yeah, well, meanwhile, Kirk is trying to wash off the blood on the van with his spit.
Yeah.
Kirk, there is a lot of blood on that car. You're going to need a ton of spit.
I know, and it's so hot. You got to stay hydrated, man.
Because it's so dry now. That blood is so dry. It is basically burned into the van now.
Yeah. So Sally remarks that the hitchhiker appeared to be trying to write something in blood on the van. Mm-hmm. So then they find the overgrown remains of Sally and Franklin's childhood home. What's left of the place is completely grown over and abandoned. Franklin is totally preoccupied with the encounter they had with the hitchhiker, and then everybody goes inside, leaving Franklin on his own outside.
Look, I get it. I would be freaked the fuck out by that. I'd be like, look, guys, I don't want to go to some decrepit house. I just want to get the fuck out of here.
I know. If they pulled in there, I'd be like, really? This place looks like it is fucking top to bottom spiders.
And they just keep leaving Franklin everywhere. They're like, he's fine. He's fine. They're off to have a good time, except for some reason, their good time, it sounds like a lot of zoo noises.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Also, Franklin and Jerry are both seen eating the barbecue from the gas station here. So in many of the kind of like folktale fairy tales, humans offered fairy food are often trapped in the fairy world forever, and they're like slaves to the fairies. So
hey,
now,
everybody, I promise we're not going to do this with every episode.
so Franklin gets a bad rap. Everybody talks about him like he's the worst, but this is about the only scene that I can pick up that really strikes me as annoying.
If I have any more fun today, I don't think I'm going to be able to take it.
Yeah. And I can't exactly blame the guy for being pissed off. His sister and his friends leave him at the fucking van, and they go into this shitty dump, and he can't get in there, and he can't fucking navigate. He smashes his hand on the door jamb and stuff. This sucks, man. Like, I fucking get it. I too would be like, fuck this shit. I wouldn't be blowing raspberries, but you know.
No, but you would be throwing a whole handful of change down the stairs. Speaking of callbacks.
Oh boy, deep cut. Man, my knee fucking hurt.
Well, I get it.
So yeah, like he's fallen out of the fucking chair already. He might even have urine on him. Like,
well, that's
this
the thing,
guy's
is, like,
having a really bad day.
They just sort of leave him. Like, they leave him like in the van. I mean, at least this time they sort of take him out. But like, you know, and he doesn't. That's why I wonder why they put this character in a wheelchair, because
I don't understand either.
Because
it doesn't. It's sort of like, I think, what was the one we were talking about that also sort of had like an arbitrary disability?
Friday 2.
That's it. Like, what purpose does it serve? In terms
it does
of
nothing for the story, and I think it is a poor representation of a disabled person, because it's like they really make Franklin. I think it's just to make him seem even more vulnerable and sort of helpless. But the reality is, people who are in wheelchairs are not helpless. Like, they are capable of like getting in and out of things, and they like, this is the world they live in. They know how to navigate it. They're not fucking new at this. Like, unless he just ended up in a wheelchair, but he like doesn't seem even able to roll the thing on his own. Like,
yeah, it very much smacks of like an actor who they were like, wheelchair, and he was like, I guess I'm in a wheelchair, and just like figured it out on set.
Right. Like, if this was your everyday existence, you would know how to use the thing and navigate the world around you. And like, that's why it feels a little like it's super ableist. It's like, this is just to sort of like pull on our heartstrings a little bit, but you already made him an asshole, so it's not really helping anything. It's a little bit, it's unnecessary.
Yeah. Also, that actor, I guess, was like a method actor and stayed in character the whole time, like even between shots and shit. And that would have been fucking annoying as hell.
Everybody.
This guy who just pisses and moans the entire time.
Yeah. And he would like, there's one of the things I was watching, they're telling some story, and he was like, Kirk, get me a soda. And he was like, you're not disabled. Get the fuck up and get your own soda. Like, that's what I would like. It's again, why you do it? Like, everybody on this set of this movie was miserable. You're only making it worse.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, in terms of like characters and the fact that Franklin among fans of this movie has this reputation, I would argue that Jerry is a far worse.
Oh yeah. Jerry's the worst one. Like, Kirk gets a pass because he's handsome.
Kirk, here's the thing: is I think Kirk is all right. Like,
but Jerry looks like Disco Stew, and like
he looks like Disco Stew. Oh my god!
Yeah, it's
I was thinking he looked like Artie Ziff, but Disco Stew
also,
is far more apropos.
I mean, they're pretty similar characters, but oh yeah. So this
what is that? 2, 3?
I think it's 3 now. So when they leave him, this is when they're like, "Well, we're gonna go swimming for an hour." I know. And of course, they're not going swimming, but
no.
If by swimming you mean fucking, then sure.
Yeah, Franklin then directs Kirk and Pam out to the creek behind the house so they can go swimming.
That's what I really like. This is where Franklin gets his revenge, because he just keeps sending people off to their slaughter.
I never thought of that. Yeah, so after they take off, he spots a grim piece of art on the floor made from bones, teeth, and feathers.
So all of this shit was real. Like, all these bones and feathers, like, they just found them. Mm-hmm. Like, all of it, like, when they fill the house with them, that's just found bones.
That's a lot of fucking bones.
Yeah,
and teeth,
that's what I mean.
man.
Like,
Oh my God.
Why do you have Texas? Why do you
And
have so
here's the
many
thing,
bones and
some of-
teeth?
Some of those teeth that we see have fucking dental work.
Yeah, like we grew up in New Hampshire. I know from bones, but like that's a lot of bones.
That's a lot of bones, my man. Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, and then he spots another totem sort of made of bones hanging on the from the door.
Please, folk art.
Folk art. So, yeah, another path emerges here. Franklin tells them that the creek they're looking for is out back, located between two sheds. And it's at this point that the sort of story shifts from Little Red Riding Hood to Hansel and Gretel, as Sally and friends are now sort of lost in the wild and they're stranded. So Pam and Kirk run down to the creek. Is there a creek, or is
Now,
it just
wouldn't
like a
you know
dry
it?
bed?
The creek is dry.
Okay, that's what I thought. They're distracted when they hear a generator running in the distance. They go to investigate, and they find a rundown farmhouse littered with all kinds of weird shit.
Now, I think this is where we start to see some really interesting camera work. Because up till now, it's a lot of really close, kind of claustrophobic shots.
Oh, yeah, because we've just been, like, stuck in the van.
But now, this is where I think Pearl's camera work, he's able to kind of stretch out a little bit.
Yeah.
And apparently they only had 60 feet of track for the
so
dolly.
they had to, like, it was like they were laying track, and they would, like, pick it up
Yeah.
from the rear and just put it in front of the dolly.
Yeah, it was like when James Garfield died, there was like a train, the procession, like when they take the body on tour.
Yeah.
And apparently he was so beloved that the railroad workers got out because they were like, we're going to run out of fucking track. The railroad workers got out in front of it and just kept building track to allow his body to reach the other shore. Something like that. They would like grab pieces from the back of the dolly track and put them on the front, like crawling underneath.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, like Hansel and Gretel, they're here looking for help. There's a mysterious house out in the middle of the wilds. They could probably get some gas where Hansel and Gretel were lured to the house by candy and baked goods it was made out of.
Same thing.
So, yeah, Pam and Kirk stray from the safety of the path and enter the dangerous world occupied by the giant, the witch, or the ogre who intends to eat them. Okay. So now Kirk knocks on the door at the front of the house while Pam waits on the swing in the yard. Finds a single tooth on the porch,
Look,
which...
when you find a tooth, a human tooth, it is time to go.
Time to go. You are in a bad place. You're in a bad place. And you know what else would, if I'm in there and I hear like pig noises from the back of the house, I'm not going to that fucking house.
No, I mean, look, as someone who has had teeth pulled out, those things do not come out easy. And this is a whole one of them.
Yeah, inside he hears what sounds like a pig, and for like a fucking idiot, he goes in to investigate.
Do you know what it is? What he's hearing?
It's Leatherface.
He's doing a thing to call the hogs.
Oh, like a suey thing?
Which is so upsetting.
Oh, the noises Leatherface makes they get to me.
Because he's like luring him into the house.
Yeah.
This part is very, very disturbing.
Yeah. Oh God. It's because first of all, it's the first time we know like, oh shit, these people are fucked. Look at that guy. Because he goes to investigate the ominous room at the back of the house. Then he trips, stepping in, and it's intercepted by a massive man in a butcher's apron and a mask made from the skin of other people's faces. Leatherface hits him over the head with a hammer, causing him to have a seizure on the floor.
And it's his leg, so he's convulsing on the floor.
This
and his
is a
leg
callback. This is a callback to something that Franklin said about the way that the cows would behave when they were hit with the hammer.
Oh, and like
they would like jerk around like that.
But it's like it's even more disturbing because his leg is slamming into this wooden ramp and it's causing the ramp to like clatter. It is so upsetting.
Yep. And then he drags the body away and slams the steel door shut behind him. Fucking iconic shot.
Yeah, in a way that is like it is an exclamation point on the entire scene. It is finality.
100%. So also note about this, no one in the cast up to this point had seen Hansen in the costume.
Yeah, none of them saw him until their scene with him.
Yeah, and so like when Kirk sees him here, this is probably one of many takes, but like presumably among these takes there was a first take where he saw this for the first time and was probably like, oh shit.
I think they did that in It as well, the most recent one.
Oh no shit, that's awesome. Yeah, man. Like, I mean, there's something to that, man. Like, make a cool monster, but don't show your people until they're actually on set. You get a good reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So outside, Pam gets impatient, gets up off the swing in one of the movie's signature cool shots.
And so this is the one. This is Daniel Pearl, he like came up with this on the fly, and he said what he wanted to do was he wanted it to look. So obviously they had to track to follow her.
This is my favorite shot in the whole movie.
It's a really cool shot.
I think it's amazing.
He wanted to make it look like the house was sort of growing bigger in front of her as she walked forward, and it really does.
It does. Oh my God, mission accomplished.
Now, she was kind of uncomfortable with it because she was like, you want me to sit on, because of what she's wearing. She's wearing like, you know, kind of booty shorts. And she's like, so I'm going to stand up. You're going to be behind me with a camera. Like, it's a little lecherous in that way, which I don't love that, but
I mean, maybe I don't.
Well,
this
for her,
is just
like,
me,
this is
and maybe I'm
from-
just fucking naive, but like, I have never seen, there's no male gaze to that scene from.
not really,
you know?
but I think she was very self-conscious because she's like, my ass is kind of hanging out and you're following me from below.
Okay.
And when she lays it out that way, it's like, oh. And she was kind of like, I just did it and I tried to, because she was like, I went to see this premiere with my family.
Ooh.
And she was like, I didn't want like that scene. I didn't like my parents to see. Like it made her feel gross. Like it made her feel really objectified. And she's like, so I just kind of laughed it off and rushed through it. And she was like, everybody else kind of did too. So I was really thankful. But like, I was like, I get it. I see where you're coming from. It's a very awkward moment because they are following her ass essentially. But I don't think he's doing it to be, well, I don't think Daniel Pearl is doing it to be disgusting. I think that's how he wanted to shoot the thing. So it looked very looming and, you know, but I get where she's coming from.
Yeah, I mean, if the mission is to sort of make the house seem larger, shooting from an extreme low angle is how you fucking do that. So.
Yeah, it is Orson Welles.
Yeah,
You like Orson Welles now.
Slow it down now.
Mm-hmm.
She approaches the house and enters, stumbling into a room that's full of feathers, bones, and teeth.
Nope, I would shit myself right then and there.
There's a large hen in a small bird cage and furniture made from and adorned with human bones.
So this is another moment in the kind of history of the film that's a little disappointing. So when she first did this scene, she kind of stumbles in and she kept hitting her like shin on, there's a bucket that she kind of kicks across the room.
Yeah.
She kept hitting her shin. She was like, that it really hurts. Can we just like take the bucket out? And he was like, no, the bucket stays in.
Ugh.
And like eventually she was like, by like the 15th take, my leg is bleeding. It's like black and blue. And it's like, okay, we're starting to get into like what's his face?
Francis Ford Coppola territory.
Yeah, I don't love it.
Yeah. But yeah, I do want to point out the fucking soundtrack is just this amazing noise score.
That is a cacophony that is very overwhelming.
Yeah. I don't know what that sound is. It's like reversed cymbals and stuff like that. A lot of reverb and shit. It's loud and it's like, it's disorienting. It's so fucking nasty. We also get a lot of nauseating close-up shots of human remains. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you what, for all of that like disappointment that I felt like when I was a teenager and I saw this, like as an adult, dirty, dry, and dusty, not to mention like feathers everywhere, way more gross.
Yeah, you could feel it. You could taste it.
You could taste it. I every time I see her like on the ground, I'm like, oh my God, don't inhale too strongly or you're going to get a mouthful of those fucking feathers.
Also, you definitely have tetanus.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But also, back to the fairy tale shit. This is Bluebeard's Bride, where Pam explores the house, makes a terrible discovery. She's grabbed by the witch, thrown onto a hook, just like in Bluebeard's Past Brides. You
gotta put your past bride somewhere.
You gotta, they take up space. So horrified, Pam goes to leave, but the steel door suddenly opens and Leatherface tries to grab her. She runs, making it as far as the porch.
But he does. So this is where I kind of get what Hooper was saying about he's like a little bit spooked because Leatherface in this moment is like, oh my God, what do I do?
Yeah,
what do I do?
Yeah.
What do I gotta? I gotta get her.
Yeah. He snatches her up, drags her to the room behind the steel door, and hangs her from a fucking meat hook by her neck.
And so this is another moment where he clips that the last frame. And what it's in my note, and I think this is a good analogy. It's sort of like when you're in the car with someone and they tap the brakes before they stop. It's a little bit like that where you're like,
You know what this is like when people say, I think it's bullshit when people are like, it's your imagination that makes it scary. But like in this case with this editing technique, like when he throws her up there and then cuts away, like you can feel that hook in your fucking neck.
Yeah, it's not your imagination that makes it scary. He just jammed her onto a hook. You just didn't see it happen, but you know it happened.
Ugh.
And then she stays there for a while.
Yeah, and so he leaves her hanging there and then fires up a chainsaw to butcher the remains of Kirk, who's just slung over the table.
Poor handsome Kirk.
He had to like wave that chainsaw, a real chainsaw with a chain on it, around that actor, like inches from his body as he's
And he
doing
said
this.
he couldn't really see out of the mask. He had very limited vision, and so he was constantly like, oh my God.
I would have been a nervous wreck. Also, Gunnar Hansen has lifts in his boots, and he kept like smashing his head in like the fucking door jams and stuff, to a point that I guess he got knocked out once.
Oh.
So back in the van, Jerry menaces Franklin about the hitchhiker. It's getting dark, and Pam and Kirk haven't come back yet, so Jerry goes down the trail looking for them, eventually finding the house. Of course, he goes inside, hearing the sounds of a chicken inside.
And Jerry says, hey guys, quit playing games. Quit goofing on me. I'm like, that is the most 70s shit I've ever. Quit goofing. I'm going to start using that.
It's like we talk about this in the Final Exam episode where they do this in horror movies a lot, where it's like, Kirk, is that you? And like nobody answers. And he's like, Pam, are you messing with me? It's like, no, there is a lunatic in this house making chicken noises.
Yeah, listen.
Go away.
I'm going to put this out there. If anybody is ever with me and they disappear and then I start hearing chicken noises coming from
You're
this
fucked.
random
I'm sorry,
house.
You're fucked. You're
I'm
fucked.
out.
I'm sorry. I'm out. I'm gone.
I will call the police later when I'm not there so they don't shoot me or something. But like, I'm not coming to look for you. And I'm certainly not going to be like, is this just a prank? It is not.
No. So Jerry stumbles to the back butcher room and he finds Pam's body stuffed in a standing freezer.
So apparently they had wanted to use this. What they wanted this to be like a big reveal, like big smoke, plumes of frozen air, whatever the fuck coming out of the air. But they couldn't get the dry ice to work. So what they did was they put her in the freezer and they had her smoking a cigarette. And then they'd be like, all right, is it ready? And she'd be like, I guess so. And then they'd open it like it was supposed to, like she's fucking hotboxing herself with like a Marlboro light. And they open it. And of course it doesn't work. But I'm like, that is some real low tech bullshit.
I know. But yeah, she suddenly lurches to life. But Leatherface then appears suddenly behind them and smacks Jerry over the head, thank God, with the hammer. Panicked, Leatherface runs up to the window looking to see if there are any more people looking to break into his house. And he's bummed.
He really does.
He's just in his house all by himself, just doing Leatherface things.
He's got this like, he's really selling like, oh shit. Oh, what do I do? What do I do now? I wasn't expecting anybody and now I don't have anywhere to put them.
Yeah. Like, oh, and that's the thing is like, I mean, he's panicking and shit, but I mean, the bright side, they'll have plenty to eat in the coming months.
Yeah. It's a real like, oh, they're going to be so mad at me.
Yep. Tobe Hooper has said as much in the interviews that Leatherface only killed the kids because he was alone in the house and was afraid of the people who kept wandering in.
Fair. Very fair. He does not do anything to these people until they walk into his house. What do you do if someone walks into your house and you...
Hey, Texas is definitely a castle doctrine state.
He
so
is
it's
standing
their
his
fucking
ground.
fault, man.
He's doing it with a chainsaw, but that is his right as an American.
But yeah, as he's like doing that freak out shit, there's also another really awesome shot where like it's like a close up on him, and then it cuts back out to the room outside where it's sort of like looking in at Leatherface, kind of freaking out, but like in between him and the camera is the table with the chainsaw on it. Another shot that I just love.
So what Gunnar Hansen had said was he wanted to give this portrayal, like obviously Leatherface is supposed to be developmentally disabled.
Yeah.
And he was like, I didn't want to be offensive. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't know about that, my dude. I think you kind of failed there. But I think it's really interesting to be like, this is an aspect of the character that is a defining trait but one that is not contributing to his sort of psychopathology.
Right.
Like, he's not a lunatic because he's developmentally disabled. And I think that's a really interesting approach for 1974. I don't think he does it. I think it is still sort of offensive.
Yeah.
Because again, just like sort of Franklin in the wheelchair, it envisions a world in which all developmentally disabled people are sort of like giant babies.
Right.
And then obviously this is not the case, and we know that now. I don't think he would have known that in 1974. But I do think it's interesting to be like, I wanted it to be respectly. I wanted Leatherface to be a respectful portrayal.
It's like, you know what, A for effort, guy.
Yeah.
But I applaud your sort of approach to sensitivity. You just don't really have the sort of like personal vocabulary to really kind of to get there fully. But you tried, man. You tried.
Good on you.
So it's nighttime now. Back at the van, Franklin and Sally argue about what to do. Franklin wants to go back and get
Franklin is downright hysterical.
He is. He's a little effeminate too.
He really, but I think that's also a kind of part of that to make Franklin seem ridiculous. Like the wheelchair, the complaining, the kind of high pitched hysteria. He is a very effeminate character because the women, this is a movie about kick-ass women. I don't know if you knew that. But the women don't really like, these characters are very badly drawn. Like, you don't know anything about them. You don't give a shit about them. The only one you really get a sense of is Franklin, and he is a hysterical woman.
He really is.
Like, this is a character that would typically be played by a woman.
Sure. Yeah. A kick-ass woman.
Yep. So, this is about badass women.
Yeah. So Franklin presses the issue, goes to see if the keys are in the van while Sally threatens to go out and look for Jerry herself. Finding no keys, they both head off into the darkness to look
Well,
for their
first he
friends.
has to lose his goddamn mind and try to keep the flashlight from her until she like wrenches it from his hands.
The forbidden house, we've got the path, we've got the giant. They all whittle the cast down to just Sally and Franklin, a sort of more fitting example of Hansel and Gretel. Just like the others, they're lured to the witch's house to be cooked and eaten.
Now, I don't want to poke holes in this because I don't think you're necessarily wrong. I do think it's possible, though, that archetypes and tropes exist for a reason.
So this is the thing that I was thinking about as I was writing about this, is I think that these appear in the story as they do. And I don't know what you put into Carl Jung, but there is this kind of higher level of symbology that sort of expresses itself, that like it's just a common horror story language that just in the different context of like stories written in the 1600s and horror movies made in the 1970s, it's just common stuff.
And especially when you have a movie or a plot that is very, very simple.
Yeah.
When you're not even going as far as to give your characters
going
much
through this.
dimension.
Also, it's not a single cohesive fairy tale story. It's like a pastiche. Like it's bits and pieces pulled off of a shelf. But the thing is I've tried to sort of apply this model to other horror movies, and I can't.
But other horror movies are this is a very simple film. It is not a well-drawn plot. These characters have no dimension.
I'll give you that. It is really much a sort of set them up and knock them down kind of body count movie.
Yeah. And like everybody is just sort of slotted into their roles. And so I think if it, and I'm not saying it's wrong, I just think like if it feels more apparent, that's probably why.
Yeah. So now some ways into the thicket, Franklin and Sally spot the Leatherface house in the distance and they head for it. Unfortunately, they also run into Leatherface, who charges out of the bushes and chainsaws Franklin to death.
It's a pretty great moment.
It's an awesome moment because he's like, "What?" His like limbs are flailing. Mm-hmm. But like, also, I had never really noticed it before 4K. But like, Leatherface is pretty bloody, and there is like blood like spraying up onto him as he.
This is probably the only scene where you really see kind of gore, I guess.
Yeah. Sally runs and Leatherface chases her. Now, from this moment on, the soundtrack of the movie is just Marilyn Burns screaming.
Yep. Apparently, because he is quite a bit taller than she is and larger.
Oh, is this because she moved really slowly?
Yeah,
he moved really quickly.
He was running so fast and she couldn't really run. So he kept like catching her too soon. And so he would have to like find ways to kind of busy himself while he was running, like to slow down. I think at the end with the hitchhiker, the same thing happens.
Yeah. Because you see him like she's just running, making a beeline to the road, and he's doing this like
he's serpentine.
He's doing this like
flailing around.
ADHD serpentine thing, like flailing the knife around and shit.
Yep.
So Leatherface keeps catching up to her. She always manages to give the slip. Eventually coming to the house, unaware that all of her friends are inside, chopped up for meat.
Mm-hmm.
She runs inside, closing the door behind her. Runs upstairs while Leatherface cuts through the door. Sally collapses at the feet of a desiccated old man who might be dead. Maybe? Question mark. There's also a definitely dead old lady.
So that old lady,
I love the detail is as she gets up to turn, there's also like a mummified dog that she just like kicks across the room.
So the old lady mummy, apparently, I can't remember the guy who did the effects and the makeup and everything. He's used that mummy in like 4 different movies. He just kind of sneaks it in there. It's in The Howling.
Oh shit! Yeah, you know what?
He
looks at it. And he's like, you know what? It's a good mummy. I'm gonna use that again.
It's a perfectly good mummy. It's a shame people would throw away a perfectly good white boy like that.
With Leatherface back on her trail, Sally leaps through the attic window and flees.
Is this when he spooks or she like spooks him?
Yes.
And he kind of like jumps.
Again, I fucking love it. Leatherface is the fucking standout performance of the movie.
It's a weirdly endearing moment. Because you can tell that he's like, ah!
When he like freaks out, I'm like, yeah, I get that. I understand. So she
just goes right through that fucking window. Zero hesitation.
Nope, no cuts.
And it is a stunt person going through the window. It is her landing though. And apparently
she hurt herself on the leg.
Yeah, she like fucked up her leg and he's like, nope, get up, keep going.
Yeah. Walk it off, rub a little dirt on it.
Mm-hmm.
She runs into the back door of the gas station from before, and the old man slams it behind her, doing his best to calm her. And there's no phone to call the cops, so he has her chill while he goes to get the truck. And now we get the shots of that fucking barbecue cooking in the red light. Looks so gross.
Yeah.
Would not eat that barbecue.
That's because it's people.
You're gonna find like human hair in it and shit.
Yeah, because it's people.
Because it's people. So when the old man returns, he has a bag and some rope.
I think it's hilarious when he's like unfurling the bag, like just casually.
Yeah. She starts to panic again. So she tries to fight him off, but he gets the best of her, knocks her out, ties her up.
By swatting her with a broom.
Yes. He throwing the bag over her head and he loads her into the truck. So this, back to the whole wolf thing. He now has sort of like hag-like characteristics in like fairy tales sometimes, in like the form of like gypsy witches. I put that in quotations. Or like the Krampus who steals children, presumably to be eaten, and then stuffs them into a bag.
I like that he's like apologizing for taking so long, and then he just keeps whacking her with the broom.
I know, because there are times when he's like, well, I don't really take much to killing, but man, does he love tormenting her.
So this is the second time where I was like, the movie it takes a turn in its tone where it becomes a lot more explicitly absurd.
Yeah. Because this is when he's going to get, because now they're going to get into the house. I think the whole thing, I think the twist in the tone here is supposed to be like, we are in the madhouse now.
And I think this is where I'm like, I don't know if this was the best choice.
It's a choice. I get it. I think it was another deliberate thing where he's trying to be like, now she is just at the mercy of purely crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that much I know. I don't know. It just feels like a weird shift to go from like a more abstract terror.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's a very specific thing. Because I think that's what I was just saying is like, you can slot all these characters in because this is just terror. It is like nonstop, relentless terror. And now all of a sudden there's a much more specific plot unfolding. And it's like, wait, this is the end of the movie.
You could tell it because, I mean, it is really sort of the one sort of deficiency of the story is the fact that our sort of protagonists are just broad strokes caricatures of just like regular people that we're supposed to sort of like recognize from our life. But we don't know shit about them, and they don't really put any effort into them. Holy shit, does he love his monsters?
Yeah, and I think that's what kind of caught me off guard. And I'm like, I don't know.
I could totally understand like why Rob Zombie is constantly pointing to this movie with his.
Oh yeah. I mean, it just
also he loves his monsters way more than his victims.
Yeah. Which is not, I understand why he's doing it in the context of this movie. I don't like it as a broad theme. I don't think that that's a good thing. We shouldn't be doing that as people. But it also just, it's in terms of continuity and consistency, it's a little strange to go from really abstract themes to hardline story.
Yeah.
Like halfway, more than halfway through.
Because all of a sudden it does sort of like, it does kind of, it doesn't grind to a halt, but it slows down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in the darkness up ahead, we see a familiar face. The hitchhiker is heading back to the house. The old man gets out and beats him up, giving him hell for going out and messing with the graveyard, implying that they're related.
He says, don't you got any self-respect?
I know. When he gets to the house and he sees the door all like sawed up, he's like, Leatherface, you idiot. Ain't you got no pride in your home?
Which again, like, I know what they're doing, but it's like, okay, reel it in, buddy.
Yeah. So not only that, it also turns out that Leatherface is related to them. So Leatherface comes out of the back dressed in an apron with a new mask on.
Yep. Question, Leatherface, is it a wig?
I have that note right here. So the old man chases him around while the hitchhiker ties Sally up, recognizing her from before. The dining room is furnished almost entirely with bones and body parts.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
He and Leatherface go upstairs and get Grandpa, who, as it would happen, is quite alive in spite of appearances. They set him down next to Sally and cut her finger, feeding the blood to Grandpa, who lazily comes to life and sucks the wound, and she passes out.
So, I don't think I like this part. The sucking on the finger thing. It's like, it implies that like it's giving him life. It's like, well, wait a minute. Also, so apparently this John Duggan, the guy who plays Grandpa, it took 5 hours to get this makeup on.
He hated it so much that he said, I'm not doing this again, so you've got me. We're going to get all of these shots in as long as I'm in this makeup, because if I take it off, it's not going back on. And so this is what leads to this fucking gauntlet. The part of the movie that everybody kind of knows about as far as this production goes, the sort of movie's notoriety as far as a film production goes.
And I will say,
sounds horrible.
Because I think John Duggan is probably the one who's maybe the most outspoken about this. I watched an interview with him, a pretty long interview with him, in which, so I watched a lot of interviews with the different cast members, and you can tell everybody is trying to be maybe diplomatic. They don't want to come out and say shitty things, but there's a lot of like, it kind of heavily implied like Tobe Hooper was unethical and unprofessional pretty much across the board.
Yeah.
And he says, Tobe Hooper has said, by the end of the movie, everybody hated me because I had so much clarity and I knew exactly what I wanted. And I was like, really, is that why everybody hated you,
here's
buddy?
The thing, like, I kind of like as like from a producer point of view, I fucking get it. You have no money. You are operating on the slimmest of fucking margins. You cannot fuck up. You have to come in on budget, and you've only got like these costumes and this stuff, so you got to make it work. So I understand that there is this drive to sort of get the fucking shots and keep moving on. But
right, that's the problem, is the but. It's like, yeah, I get that you want to be on time and on budget, but not at the expense of everybody's
health. The cost of delivering this picture is incredibly high.
And that is where I'm going to come down on at the end of this. But so in this interview with John Duggan, he's sort of, I think he's trying to be polite, and but at a certain point they start talking about Marilyn Burns, and he starts to cry out of nowhere. And he's just like, she was so committed, and he put her through absolute hell. And he is crying while telling this story. He's like, she was such a nice person, and she really wanted this, and she really wanted to deliver this character. And he was basically just being like, he was an absolute monster to her.
Yeah.
And he did not care about whatever happened to her. And I was just like, oh, wow. That says a lot.
So we've talked about this in some of our other episodes, particularly like the ones that sort of the big four. I believe Hooper is the one who is like really kind of got carried away with the whole auteur thing.
Yeah.
Because like Romero didn't do this.
Nope.
Craven didn't do this. You know,
No,
Carpenter
that's
certainly
the opposite.
didn't do this. These guys were like, they went out of their way and afforded their actors like as much comfort as they possibly could. Hooper is just like, fuck you, we're getting this. I don't care if it's 120 degrees in here and smells like rotten meat.
And like, I have zero respect for that kind of person.
Yeah, yeah. Because honestly, end of the day, it doesn't fucking matter, dude.
No, it's a goddamn horror movie.
It's a horror movie. Like, chill the fuck out. When Sally finally comes to, they're all quietly gathered around the table. Then she starts screaming at the horrible sight, setting off everybody at the table who screams too. Leatherface again is dressed in his dinner mask with makeup and a nice jacket and a jaunty little tie.
I do like that he kisses Grandpa on the head. It's another very endearing moment.
Yeah. Leatherface, cutest mass murderer?
Probably.
Sweetest mass murderer?
Yeah.
So let's talk about this scene because we keep kind of dancing around it. So this scene is a notorious cautionary tale about producing. So the production of just this scene took 27 straight hours of film. We said that John Dugan, who put the makeup on, hated the process, and he said, "This is all you're getting out of me." So Hooper made the most of it. This meant that they had to black out the windows during the day, which caused the temperature in the room to climb to 120 degrees. There is real food on the table. The set dressing is real animal carcasses. Marilyn Burns' costume is so soaked in fake blood that it is stiff to the touch. It's the same costume that she has been wearing like this whole time. She's also hurt from some of her stunts. Gunnar Hansen has been wearing this and sweating in the same costume for the last month because Hooper was worried that if he washed it, the color would change or it would vanish like Marilyn Burns' shirt did. Which apparently she took it to the laundry and like left it in the laundry and somebody fucking took it. And so luckily there was another one at the store that she got it from. Cast and crew are periodically leaving the set to vomit. It is a hell of a scene, but like what a cost, man. Like I said, the human cost of this scene is entirely too fucking high. By the time they finished this, everybody fucking hated Tobe Hooper. But they couldn't have hated him that much because Marilyn Burns and Edwin Neal both come back around to work with him again in the future.
I mean, but I'll talk about that at the end.
Yeah.
Because there's a big ethical problem.
Yeah. So the movie is really sort of ambiguous about how these people are all related. But even though they call him Grandpa, apparently in the script, he's just another one of the brothers.
Yeah.
And the old man is also their brother, even though he kind of feels like a father or something, but they don't treat him like a father.
Yeah. Which, again, there's a consistency problem there. It's like you're going so far as to really kind of flesh out your story, but not in a way that makes sense. It's like the one thing he didn't really care about, aside from everyone's health and safety, was the story.
I don't know. I mean, it is a very thin story. I think I'm willing to sort of let that slide simply because like the kind of sum of its parts.
It doesn't matter. I mean, it's up to this point. Who gives a shit? You don't know anything about anybody.
It is a kind of grueling, just nightmare vision of a movie that like I enjoy on that level. I don't particularly care that it's paper thin as a story.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So Hitchhiker and Leatherface Hitchhiker explains to her that the old man doesn't do much around the house. He's just the guy who cooks all the meat. He and Leatherface are the killers, and that's when he's like, I just can't take no pleasure in killing.
Yeah, he keeps saying that, and then he just taunts her while they threaten her.
Doesn't want to kill her, loves to torment her.
Yeah.
Sally begs for her life. Close-ups, extreme close-ups on her face as she screams.
But I think that is actually a really cool moment because this is a scene that is very dark. It's very kind of a lot of earth tones, and her eyes are very, very green, like brilliant green. And it is a stark difference in this like really dirty landscape.
Yeah. We get close-ups on the Sawyer family. Leatherface making pig sounds. So finally, they decide to kill her, but the hitchhiker suggests that they let Grandpa deliver the killing blow. So they bring out a big metal tub and a hammer. They set Sally up so he can smack her over the head with a hammer.
So the thing about the hammer is that it's a foam thing it's an actual handle, like a hammer handle.
Yeah.
And it goes straight through like that old style where there's like a bit of the handle comes out the top. So it's a foam piece, but he was hitting her, and the handle part was hitting her in the neck.
Ugh.
And so at a certain point, she's bleeding in the neck from where he's hitting her.
There is a shot that looks like the hammer actually connects and it's bloody. I wonder if that's the real fucking injury.
He says that's what that is. That is her being hit by the top
That's a bad
part.
fucking injury, man.
Yep.
So yeah, when they put the hammer in his hand, he's so close to dead that he just kind of drops it. So they set up several hits, helping him out with a couple, but it's not working. It's such a fiasco that Sally manages to get away and jumps out the window again, running away from the house.
I love that Sally, the chair that she's tied to has actual human arms.
Human arms. Yeah. So the sun is rising now as she heads for the road with the hitchhiker close behind and Leatherface not far behind with a chainsaw. Hitchhiker is like slashing her across the back with his razor, but she manages to reach the road covered in blood. So yeah, this is the, to just kind of like close out my sort of fairy tale thing. This is Jack running away from the beanstalk. He's got the giant coming up with the fucking axe and stuff like that.
Okay.
Returning to the sort of human world. Hitchhiker is so preoccupied with slashing up Sally that he doesn't notice a semi-truck coming and goes under the wheels.
Yeah, it's the steamroller in Austin Powers is what it is.
Because we see like from the inside of the truck like approaching and he's just like, ah!
Yeah, he's got like a good 30 seconds to get out of the way.
You could see like making of footage of that scene, and it's a pretty funny dummy that gets run over.
It's a great moment though. It's very satisfying.
Yeah. The driver pulls over to get out, but here comes Leatherface. So they get back in the truck and climb out the other side while Leatherface tries to saw the door. Then he comes around, gives chase, but he runs into a branch, falling and dropping the saw on his leg, which cuts him badly.
And you feel a little bad for him.
You do a little. So here's another thing that sounds extremely fucking perilous. This is a special effect that could have gone horribly fucking wrong. The scene is the chainsaw actually cutting Hansen's leg. He wore a steel plate under the costume and some sort of like meat over it to kind of give the impression that he got cut. So when the saw hit the plate, the friction from the blade caused it to heat up immediately, and Hansen thought that the saw missed the plate and chopped his rear leg.
Oh.
I cannot imagine that kind of panic. So the driver and Sally keep running until another truck comes along. Sally climbs into the bed as it drives around, leaving Leatherface behind, angrily swirling his chainsaw around in the sunrise as Sally watches him disappear into the distance, covered in blood, irreparably broken psychologically, and laughing, which is a detail that I love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that chainsaw dance that he does it is such a fucking cool shot.
Yeah.
And he said he couldn't see anything, so he was just like, he could kind of see out, from below. And he was like, I could see people like backing up.
Trying to get out of the way.
Yeah, he was like, I just had to be like as careful as I could not to get too close.
So yeah, apparently he did that when she gets away at the gas station originally. And they were like, oh shit, pocket that. And they were like, we'll use it at the end.
It's a very, very cool moment.
Yeah, it's just him doing it in that fucking Steven Spielberg golden hour shit.
Yep.
Yeah, fucking amazing stuff. But cut to black, roll credits.
This is a really hard one for me. And I think it is a little bit like when we talked about Night of the Creeps, because there is so much to like about this movie. It is impressive in a lot of ways. I think it gets a little messy towards the end. The fact that like it's inconsistent in its narrative flow bothers me a little bit, but visually and sort of sonically, it is an aggressive movie. Even by today's standards, like there is still nothing like this.
Yeah, I keep that is what strikes me every time I watch it is like Last House on the Left comes pretty close.
Yeah.
But there's a cheapness about it that sort of, without a couple of sort of key kind of shots in that movie that really kind of like really drive it home, and the fact that a woman bites a guy's penis off in it, it doesn't quite achieve the sort of like fucking dirty, filthy realness that this one gets to.
Well, I think also Last House on the Left never really gets out of the grindhouse. That's just sort of where it lives. Like it is a dark movie. I don't think that movie has rewatchability. I think that movie's really upsetting. And I think if he's trying to remake Virgin Spring, you think he's missing some pretty key things about the Virgin Spring. knowing the backstory of the production is what really bothers me about this. So, do you know who Jenny Olsen is?
That name rings a bell.
She directed Paris is Burning.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And, because one of the things quite famously about this movie is that nobody made any fucking money. Like, they all went through this horrible, grueling process. Nobody made any money. None of them really got anything out of it. Like, yeah, she went on to make a couple more movies, but probably because she couldn't get work.
Was the thing that when I was looking it up, like, it was frustrating to sort of report on what the cast did because, like, after this movie, not much.
No, because this was a fucking terrible. They were probably like, if that's acting, I'm out.
Yeah.
And so the thing about Jenny Olsen was she made Paris is Burning and nobody got paid. It was kind of a student project. I think it was her thesis project.
Yeah.
For NYU. And nobody got paid. And the thing is, it's true that nobody got paid, but Jenny Olsen got a career out of it. The rest of those people, a couple of them got murdered.
Yep.
A couple of them died other ways. Like, it's a really sad story. And it is a question of ethics. And just like this movie, Tobe Hooper didn't make any money, but Tobe Hooper got a really big career out of this movie. All anybody else got was fucking traumatized.
Yeah.
And so I have a hard time being like, he's an auteur. He's a brilliant filmmaker. This is an incredible film. It's like, he did some really heinous shit to these people so he could have a career and didn't really give a fuck about what happened to them. And the thing is, nothing happened to them. No, they got nothing for all of this.
Yeah.
And that's for me, that's really hard to get past. Because there's a lot to really appreciate about this movie. I think it is super influential. It's very important. But all I can see when I watch it is someone who does not give a shit about the people who are helping him make this movie. And that is really, really terrible. Like, you're a bad person if that's who you are.
It's worth knowing these things, but like for me, it's a good movie made, with a fucking high cost by somebody who, by all accounts, really kind of sucks. But the movie is still really fucking good, man.
Yeah, no, I can't. It's not that I can't watch it. I can't get past that when I do watch it.
Yeah, that stuff, when you find out, like, that people really kind of went through some shit to, like, make a fucking movie, like, you do have to be reminded that you're just making movies, man.
Yeah. This is just a fucking job,
Yeah, it's just arts.
It's like, you don't sell out your friends. You don't abuse the people who are helping you make a thing. Like, just to be like, this was my artistic vision. Fuck you.
Yeah, because at the same time,
fuck your artistic vision.
At the same time, other people, like, I name dropped 3 other fucking stellar directors who in this same decade made fucking movies, and they didn't have to sacrifice, like, the fucking health and safety of their cast to do it. So, yeah, that does say way more about Tobe Hooper than.
And like, I realize that, we live in an era where, and I think we are creating something in a space where people are very passionate about certain things. And that is probably a very unpopular opinion that I just put out there. But I can't respect people who do shit like that.
Oh, no. Because here's the thing. Like, I think that he is a talented director. I don't think that he's like a fucking genius or anything.
God, no.
Because he goes on to make some really weird shit.
Yeah, I think this is a very impressive film. I don't think anything else he's ever made is a very impressive film. I like some of them. I think Funhouse is a good movie.
I think Poltergeist is great.
Poltergeist is a good movie.
I think Poltergeist is great. I think Eaten Alive is great. Like, he hits up until a certain point. Right around the time he kind of gets in bed with Cannon is when things kind of go south for him.
What?
And then he never really gets out of the he never really kind of pulls out of it. I do like, but the thing is, the stuff that he made for Cannon, I also enjoy tremendously. I like Texas Chainsaw 2. Like I said at the top, I love Life Force. I also love Invaders from Mars, even though it is an objectively shitty movie.
It's a terrible film.
Yeah.
I think that's why I thought it was kind of funny that it's like, oh, look, it's William Friedkin interviewing Tobe Hooper. Two notoriously bad people.
Some of the stuff that Tobe Hooper did for TV, like I think he did the very first episode of Freddy's Nightmares. He did a couple of episodes of Masters of Horror that are quite good. He did a couple of Tales from the Crypt that are quite good. Like, he's a capable director whose movies I enjoy, but like, let's not get carried away. Let's not get carried away with this guy's accolades. It is, Tobe Hooper notwithstanding, what he has made here, with the assistance of a really talented cinematographer, they're stretching the limits of a really, really tight budget. It's a great movie. I
think that's the other thing that bothers me is that all of the credit always goes to him. And it's like, hey man, you couldn't have made this movie without all these other people.
Right. So yeah, great movie, a troubling background.
Yeah. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, too bad. I mean, still towering fucking achievement in horror. I believe that it is absolutely worthy of its reputation as a horror movie. Yeah. Outstanding. There's nothing like it. There's still nothing like it.
Nope.
So, what's next? What's our next? Because this is it. Like last year, we did like 3 Halloween movies throughout the season. What are we doing next?
Well,
we're not doing Halloween movies again.
We're not watching garbage Halloween movies, I'll tell you that much. Well, our heavy hitters continues with a movie whose production was the exact opposite of this. 1984's Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yes. I'm looking forward to that. That's a movie that I enjoy tremendously.
It is a fun one.
It's a good movie. It's fun. So yeah, take it in. We hope you enjoyed our analysis and my rather wobbly thesis. But we'll see you next week with Nightmare on Elm Street.